The telegram arrived on a Tuesday, which was fitting because Tuesdays had always been unlucky for Clara Whitmore. She was in the garden when her mother found her, dirt under her fingernails and sweat dampening the collar of her work dress. The older woman's face was pinched tight, the way it always got when she was about to deliver bad news disguised as good fortune. "You're needed inside." Clara stood slowly, brushing soil from her hands. "What's happened?" "Your father will explain." That was never a good sign. Inside the cramped Philadelphia townhouse, her father sat at the dining table with a glass of whiskey, already half empty, though it wasn't yet noon. The telegram lay before him like a death sentence, the paper edges crisp and official. He didn't look at her when she entered. "Sit down, Clara." She remained standing. "What is it?" "Your sister's husband has made a request." His voice was flat, rehearsed. Given the circumstances of Margaret's passing, he finds himself in need of a replacement. The word hung in the air like something rotten. Clara's breath caught. "A replacement." "A wife," her mother clarified from the doorway, as if that made it better. "He's willing to honor the original arrangement. The terms remain the same." Margaret's been dead 3 months, which is precisely why this is urgent. Her father finally met her eyes, and what she saw there wasn't grief or hesitation, it was relief. "Victor Crow is a wealthy man, Clara. Influential. This union benefits the entire family. Margaret didn't even know him before she married him, and now She died in childbirth," her mother cut in sharply. "A tragedy, but not uncommon. You're being given an opportunity that most women in your position would—" "My position?" Clara's voice rose despite herself. "You mean broke? Unmarried at 24? A burden?" Her father's hand hit the table. Not hard, but firm enough to rattle the glass. "You will watch your tone. This family has sacrificed considerably to raise you, to feed you, to keep a roof over your head while you've turned away every reasonable suitor who's shown interest. Now circumstances have provided a solution that serves everyone. Everyone except me. You'll leave on Friday's train," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The journey west takes 5 days. Mr. Crow has arranged accommodations and will meet you upon arrival. The wedding will take place the following week." Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her skirt. "And if I refuse?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Her mother stepped forward, softening her voice in that dangerous way she had. "Darling, you're not a child anymore. You must understand, your father's business is failing. We're 3 months behind on rent. Your brothers have families of their own to support. This arrangement secures our future. All of our futures. So I'm being sold." "You're being given a chance at a life of comfort and security," her mother corrected. "Victor Crow owns half the silver mines in the Montana Territory. You'll want for nothing. Except a choice." Her father stood abruptly, the chair scraping against wood. "The choice was made when you failed to secure your own prospects. You'll do your duty to this family, Clara. You'll go west, you'll marry Victor Crow, and you'll be grateful for the opportunity." He left the room without another word. Clara stood there, staring at the telegram, at the neat black letters that spelled out her future in someone else's handwriting. Her mother lingered in the doorway, looking like she wanted to say something comforting but couldn't quite find the words. "It won't be as bad as you think," she offered finally. Margaret seemed content in her letters. Margaret's letters had been brief and infrequent, full of polite nothings about weather and household management. Clara had thought her sister was simply busy adjusting to married life. Now she wondered what else Margaret hadn't said. "May I be excused?" Her mother nodded, already turning away. Clara climbed the stairs to the tiny room she'd shared with Margaret growing up. Her sister's side was still untouched, as if she might walk back through the door any moment and complain about Clara stealing her hairbrush. She sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. 5 days. She had 5 days before her life became someone else's property. Friday came too quickly and not quickly enough. Clara packed the single trunk she was allowed, practical dresses, undergarments, her mother's old wool coat, a Bible she'd never read but knew she was supposed to carry. At the last moment, she tucked in the small carved bird her father had made her as a child, back when he still smiled sometimes. No one came to see her off except her mother, who pressed a handkerchief into Clara's hand and told her to write. Be obedient, she whispered. Be agreeable. Men don't like women who ask too many questions. Clara nodded because it was easier than arguing. The train station was chaos, vendors shouting, children crying, steam hissing from the great iron beast that would carry her away from everything she'd ever known. She found her seat in the second-class car, wedged between a woman with 3 small children and a traveling salesman who smelled like tobacco and hair tonic. As the train lurched forward, Clara pressed her face to the window and watched Philadelphia disappear into smoke and distance. She didn't cry. She'd promised herself she wouldn't. Iken. The first 2 days were monotonous. Endless stretches of farmland giving way to rolling hills, small towns that looked exactly the same. Stations where people got on and off with their own mysterious destinations. Clara kept to herself, reading the same 3 chapters of a novel over and over without retaining a single word. On the 3rd day, somewhere in the Nebraska plains, a man sat down across from her. He was young, maybe 30, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that looked well used, and when he tipped his hat to her, his eyes were the kind of sharp that missed nothing. "Ma'am?" Clara nodded politely and returned to her book. "Long journey?" She didn't look up. "Montana Territory?" "That's so? Heading to one of the mining towns?" Something in his tone made her finally meet his gaze. He wasn't leering or presumptuous, just curious, maybe a little concerned. "I'm getting married," she said curtly, hoping that would end the conversation. It didn't. "Congratulations." He leaned back, tipping his hat lower. "Man must be eager to have you traveling all this way alone." "It's an arrangement." "Ah." He was quiet for a moment. "Well, hope it works out for you, miss." She went back to her book, but she could feel him watching her, not in a threatening way, but like he was trying to work out a puzzle. An hour later, when the train stopped for coal and water, he was gone. That night, Clara woke to screaming. At first she thought it was part of a dream, but then the gunshots started. Sharp cracks that echoed through the sleeping car like thunder. People were shouting, scrambling. Someone knocked over a lantern, and glass shattered across the floor. "Everyone stay down!" a voice roared. "We're not here for you, just your valuables." Train robbery. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed herself into her seat, trying to become invisible as heavy boots thudded down the aisle. A man in a bandana grabbed the jewelry off the woman next to her, shoved a pistol in the salesman's face, and emptied his pockets. Then he saw Clara. "Well now, what do we have here?" She couldn't speak, couldn't move. He grabbed her arm, yanked her to her feet. "Pretty thing like you probably has something worth taking. Let's have a look in that trunk." The gunshot was so close it left her ears ringing. The robber dropped, blood spreading across the floor in a dark pool. Behind him stood the man from earlier, the one who'd asked about her journey, with a smoking revolver in his hand and an expression that could have carved stone. "Get down," he told Clara. She dropped immediately. Another bandit came charging through, and the stranger put a bullet between his eyes without seeming to aim. The third one fired wild and missed. The stranger didn't. It was over in seconds. In the aftermath, with passengers sobbing and the conductor trying to restore order, the stranger holstered his gun and crouched next to Clara. "You hurt?" She shook her head, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Her whole body felt like it was vibrating. "Good." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when her legs threatened to give out. "Name's Rowan Hale. I'm a lawman out of Caldwell. Been tracking that gang for 2 weeks. You saved my life." "Just doing my job, ma'am." But something in his expression had changed. That puzzle-working look was back, more intense now. "Clara, is it? I heard you tell the conductor." She nodded mutely. "And you're heading to Montana Territory to marry a man in an arrangement." His voice had gone careful, measured. "May I ask which town?" "Silver Ridge." The change in him was subtle but unmistakable, a tightening around his eyes, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. "And the man you're marrying, does his name happen to be Victor Crow?" Clara's blood went cold. "How did you—" "Because I've heard that name before." Rowan glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Miss Whitmore, I don't mean to alarm you, but Victor Crow is known in certain circles, not for his mining success, for something else." "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, clearly weighing how much to say. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. Victor Crow has been married 3 times. All 3 wives are dead. The world tilted.
This story was
That's not
posted on the
possible.
channel west
I
of
would have known.
Betrayal.
My
Please do
family
not
would have-
repost it in any
Your
form.
family likely knows exactly what they need to know. That he's rich. That he's willing to pay handsomely for a new wife. Rowan's expression was grim. The first wife, Mary, died in a fall from a horse. The second, Elizabeth, drowned in a river. Your sister Margaret, childbirth, Clara whispered. They said childbirth. Maybe. Or maybe that's just what the doctor wrote down because Victor Crow owns half the town, including the doctor. He caught her arm gently when she swayed. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because you need to know what you're walking into. But if you think if there's evidence, there's no evidence, just a pattern. And patterns aren't proof, not in any court that matters. His jaw clenched. I've been trying to build a case for months, but Crow's too smart, too protected. No one in Silver Ridge will talk. They're all either on his payroll or too terrified to open their mouths. Clara's mind was racing, tripping over itself. So what am I supposed to do? I have no money, no family except the ones who sent me here. If I don't marry him, I know. Rowan's voice softened. I know it's not fair, but I had to tell you. I couldn't let you walk into that house blind. The conductor was calling for everyone to return to their seats, to prepare for departure. The bodies were being removed, covered with sheets. Rowan released her arm slowly. I'll be in Silver Ridge when you arrive, he said quietly. I've got business there anyway. If you need help, if you need anything, you find me. Understand? Clara nodded because she didn't trust her voice. She returned to her seat in a daze, her mind spinning with impossible questions. 3 wives, 3 dead wives. And her family had sent her anyway. Had they known? Had they cared? She pulled out the handkerchief her mother had given her and found a folded piece of paper tucked inside. A note in her mother's handwriting. Be strong. Remember your duty. Not I love you. Not be safe. Just duty. Clara crumpled the note in her fist and stared out the window at the endless darkness rushing past. The remaining 2 days dragged like years. Clara barely slept, barely ate. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Margaret's face, her sister's nervous smile on her own wedding day, the way she'd hugged Clara tight and whispered, "Wish me luck." Had Margaret known? Had she suspected? Or had she walked into that house as blind as Clara was about to? The other passengers gave her space, probably thinking she was still shaken from the robbery. Rowan Hale appeared periodically, just a nod from across the car, a brief check-in to make sure she was managing. He didn't press, didn't pry, but his presence was oddly steadying. On the 5th morning, the conductor announced they'd be arriving in Silver Ridge within the hour. Clara's hands started shaking and didn't stop. She changed into her best dress, dark green wool that brought out her eyes, or so Margaret used to say. She pinned her hair up carefully, trying to look like a woman who belonged in a mansion instead of a girl who'd been sold to save her family's debts. The train slowed. Buildings appeared outside the window, rough-hewn and functional, built for utility rather than beauty. Silver Ridge was bigger than she'd expected, sprawling across a valley with mountains looming in the distance like sentinels or guards. The platform was crowded with miners and merchants, families and drifters. Clara stepped down carefully, clutching her small bag while a porter hauled her trunk. And there, waiting at the edge of the platform, was a man who could only be Victor Crow. He was older than she'd imagined, perhaps 45, with steel-gray hair and a face that might have been handsome if it held any warmth. He wore an expensive suit that looked out of place in the dusty frontier town, and his eyes swept over Clara with the cool assessment of a man appraising livestock. Miss Whitmore. His voice was smooth, educated. Welcome to Silver Ridge. I trust your journey was uneventful? She thought of the robbery, the bodies, the blood. It was fine, she lied. Excellent. He offered his arm with mechanical politeness. My carriage is waiting. We'll get you settled at the house, and then we can discuss the wedding arrangements. Not, I'm glad you're safe. Not, I'm sorry for your loss and mine. Just arrangements. Clara took his arm because she had no choice and let him lead her to a gleaming black carriage that looked like it cost more than her childhood home. As she climbed inside, she caught sight of Rowan Hale standing near the station house watching. Their eyes met. He touched his hat brim, a promise or a warning, she couldn't tell which. Then the carriage pulled away, and Silver Ridge swallowed her whole. The Crow Mansion sat on a hill overlooking the town like a predator watching prey. It was enormous, 3 stories of dark stone and sharp angles, with windows that reflected the sky like blind eyes. The grounds were immaculate, unnaturally so, as if nature itself had been bullied into submission. Clara's stomach churned. "Impressive, isn't it?" Victor said, mistaking her silence for awe. "I built it myself. Well, supervised the construction. Only the finest materials, imported marble, Italian glass. Nothing in this territory compares." "It's very grand," Clara managed. "You'll find I don't accept anything less than perfection." He helped her down from the carriage with detached courtesy. "I expect the same from my household." Margaret understood that. "I trust you will as well." There it was, the first mention of her sister, delivered like a business memo. Clara wanted to ask how Margaret had died, wanted to demand details, but the words stuck in her throat. A severe-looking woman in black appeared at the door. The housekeeper, Mrs. Talbot, who welcomed Clara with all the warmth of a mortician greeting a corpse. "Your room is prepared, Miss Whitmore. Dinner is at 7 sharp. Mr. Crow expects punctuality." Of course. The inside of the house was just as oppressive as the outside. All dark wood and heavy drapes, expensive furnishings arranged with mathematical precision. Everything was perfect. Nothing was lived in. It felt like a mausoleum. Mrs. Talbot led Clara up a sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced men who all seemed to be judging her. "This was Mrs. Crow's room," the housekeeper said, opening a door. "Mr. Crow thought you'd be most comfortable here." Margaret's room. Clara stepped inside and immediately wanted to flee. It was beautiful in an impersonal way. 4-poster bed, silk curtains, a vanity with a silver-backed brush set. But it had been stripped of anything personal, anything that might indicate her sister had ever actually lived here. "Where are her things?" Clara asked. "Margaret's belongings?" Mr. Crow had them removed after her passing. He felt a fresh start would be more appropriate. A fresh start, as if Margaret could simply be erased. "I see. Thank you, Mrs. Talbot." The housekeeper nodded curtly and left. Alone, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and tried to steady her breathing. The room smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something medicinal that made her think of sick rooms and suffering. A soft knock made her jump. "Miss Clara." The voice was small, uncertain. Clara opened the door to find 2 children staring up at her, a girl of about 8 and a boy who couldn't be more than 5. Both had Victor's dark hair and pale skin, and both looked profoundly wary. "I'm Clara," she said gently. "You must be—" "I'm Josephine," the girl said. "This is Thomas. We're supposed to say hello and welcome you." "Supposed to?" "Father said we should be polite." Josephine's expression was carefully blank. "He said you're going to be our new mother." The word hung between them like something dangerous. Thomas tucked himself behind his sister, peering at Clara with wide, frightened eyes. "I'm not here to replace your mother," Clara said carefully. "No one could do that." "We had 2 mothers before," Thomas whispered. "They both went away." Clara's heart cracked. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." "Our first mother fell off a horse," Josephine recited in that same flat tone. "Our second mother drowned. Our third mother died having a baby." 3 mothers, 3 deaths. And these children left to navigate the wreckage. "That must have been very frightening," Clara said. Josephine shrugged. "Father says we're not supposed to talk about it. He says it upsets people." "Does it upset you?" The girl's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of raw grief before she locked it down again. "We're not supposed to say." Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Talbot's voice cut through the hallway. "Children, leave Miss Whitmore to rest. You know better than to disturb her." They fled like startled rabbits. Clara closed the door and leaned against it, her mind reeling. This house, these children, This man who collected wives like other people collected furniture, replacing them when they broke or became inconvenient. She couldn't do this, but she had no
This
choice.
story was posted on the channel west of Betrayal. Please do
Dinner
not
was a nightmare
repost it
dressed
in
up
any
as
form.
civilization. The dining room could have seated 20, but it was just Clara and Victor at opposite ends of a massive mahogany table, with Mrs. Talbot serving in cold silence. The children ate separately, apparently. Another household rule Clara was learning too late. Victor made conversation like he was conducting a business meeting, asking about her education, minimal, her skills, adequate, her health, excellent, which seemed to please him. He didn't ask about her interests, her dreams, her fears. He didn't ask anything that would require seeing her as a person. The wedding will be next Saturday, he announced over the main course. I've arranged for the minister, the venue, and the reception. You'll need to be fitted for a dress tomorrow. Mrs. Talbot will take you into town. That's very quick. I see no reason to delay. The arrangement has been made, the contract signed. A prolonged engagement serves no practical purpose. Of course. Clara picked at her food, tasting nothing. May I ask about Margaret? His fork paused halfway to his mouth. What about her? How she died. I know it was childbirth, but I'd like to understand what happened. Victor set down his utensils with precise care. Margaret developed complications during her pregnancy. Despite the best medical care available, neither she nor the infant survived. It was a tragedy, but such things happen. Nature is often cruel to women in that regard. His tone suggested the subject was closed. Clara pressed anyway. Did she say anything before? She was unconscious for most of the final hours. His eyes were flat, empty. I hardly think dwelling on painful details is productive, Clara. What's done is done. I just thought, I don't require your thoughts on the matter. His voice never rose, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I require your obedience, your discretion, and your ability to manage this household appropriately. Margaret understood her role. I expect you will as well. Clara's appetite vanished entirely. The rest of the meal passed in suffocating silence. Afterward, Victor retired to his study. Clara escaped to her room, locked the door, and finally let herself cry, quietly, into a pillow, so no one would hear. When the tears ran out, she sat at the vanity and stared at her reflection. What are you doing? She whispered to herself. Her reflection had no answer. A soft scratching sound made her turn. It came from the wall beside the bed, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone trying to get her attention. Clara approached slowly, pressing her ear to the wallpaper. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then, faintly, Miss Clara? Josephine. Clara knocked back gently. I'm here. Can you hear me? Yes. A pause. Our rooms share a wall. Thomas and I used to talk to our other mother this way sometimes. When father was angry and we couldn't come out. Clara's throat tightened. That was clever of you. Miss Clara? The girl's voice was smaller now. Are you going to die too? The question hit like a punch. No, Clara said, though she had no idea if it was true. No, sweetheart, I'm going to be fine. That's what our second mother said. Clara closed her eyes. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. You are? Yes. Another pause. Maybe you should run away. Maybe I should, Clara whispered. But where would she go? She had no money, no connections, no allies in this God-forsaken town except possibly a lawman who'd admitted he couldn't prove anything. The scratching came again, softer, hesitant. We wouldn't tell, Josephine said. If you did run away, we wouldn't tell father. Clara pressed her palm flat against the wall, wishing she could reach through and hold these broken children. Thank you, she managed. But I'm not going anywhere yet. Okay. The scratching stopped. Clara stood in the silent room, in the dead woman's space, and made herself a promise. If she was going to survive this, she needed to know the truth. All of it. Starting with what really happened to Margaret. The next morning arrived with gray light filtering through heavy curtains that Clara hadn't bothered to close. She'd barely slept, her mind cycling through impossible scenarios until exhaustion finally dragged her under sometime near dawn. A sharp knock jolted her awake. "Miss Whitmore? It's 7:30. Breakfast is served promptly at 8. Mrs. Talbot's voice carried through the door like a pronouncement. Clara struggled upright, disoriented. "I'll be down shortly." She dressed quickly in a plain day dress, splashed cold water on her face from the basin, and tried to make herself presentable. The mirror showed dark circles under her eyes and a pallor that no amount of pinching her cheeks could fix. Downstairs, the dining room was empty except for Victor, who sat reading a newspaper with his coffee. He didn't look up when she entered. "You're 3 minutes late." "I apologize. I didn't realize punctuality is a virtue I value highly." He turned a page with precise movements. "Mrs. Talbot will accompany you to town at 9 for your dress fitting. The seamstress has been instructed on appropriate styles. You're not to deviate from her recommendations." Clara took her seat, and Mrs. Talbot appeared instantly with a plate of eggs and toast. The food might as well have been cardboard. "Will the children be joining us?" Clara asked. "They take breakfast in the nursery. It's less disruptive." "I'd like to spend time with them. Get to know them before—" "That won't be necessary yet." Victor folded his newspaper and finally looked at her. His eyes were the color of stone. "Children require structure and discipline, not sentimentality. You'll be introduced to your maternal duties after the wedding, once your position is formalized." Maternal duties. Like it was a job description. Clara forced down a bite of toast that tasted like ash. "Of course. I have business in town today. I'll return this evening. You're to remain on the property unless accompanied by Mrs. Talbot. Silver Ridge can be rough. I wouldn't want anything untoward to happen to my future wife." The way he said it, "my future wife," made her skin crawl. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "I trust you'll find ways to occupy yourself. The library is at your disposal, though Margaret rarely used it. She preferred more domestic pursuits." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with her inedible breakfast and mounting dread. Mrs. Talbot reappeared to clear the plates. "If you're finished, miss, we should prepare for town. The seamstress doesn't tolerate lateness." "Mrs. Talbot?" Clara stopped her before she could leave. "How long have you worked for Mr. Crow?" The woman's expression shuddered. 12 years. "Then you knew all of his wives." "I don't engage in gossip, Miss Whitmore." "I'm not asking for gossip. I'm asking about my sister." Clara stood, trying to keep her voice level. "Did Margaret seem happy here?" Mrs. Talbot's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Crow understood her obligations. "That's not what I asked." For a moment, something flickered in the housekeeper's eyes, something that might have been pity or warning, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I suggest you focus on your own obligations, miss. The past is best left buried." She gathered the dishes with sharp, efficient movements. "I'll fetch your coat. We leave in 15 minutes." Clara watched her go, that final phrase echoing in her mind. The past is best left buried. Like Margaret. Like the others. She made her way to the library Victor had mentioned, a dark-paneled room lined with books that looked more decorative than read. Most were leather-bound classics, arranged by size rather than subject. But tucked in a corner, she found a small section of newer volumes, novels and poetry collections that showed signs of actual use. Margaret's, perhaps. Clara pulled one out, a volume of Emily Dickinson. Inside the front cover, in familiar handwriting, was an inscription. "To my dearest Margaret, may these words bring you comfort. Your loving sister, Clara." She'd given this to Margaret as a wedding gift, tucked it into her trunk with a note she'd agonized over. Her sister had brought it here, had read it, had maybe found some small solace in these pages. Clara sank into a chair, clutching the book like a lifeline. "Miss Clara?" She turned to find Josephine in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her dark hair uncombed. "Shouldn't you be getting dressed?" Clara asked gently. The girl crept closer. "I wanted to see you before you left. Mrs. Talbot says you're going to town." "Just for a dress fitting. I'll be back this afternoon." Josephine perched on the arm of the chair, eyeing the book in Clara's hands. That was Mother Margaret's favorite. She used to read to us sometimes when Father was away. "Did she?" Clara's throat tightened. She had a nice voice, soft. The girl's expression was distant, remembering. Not like Mother Elizabeth. She was loud and laughed a lot. Father didn't like that. Clara's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He said ladies shouldn't make so much noise, that it was vulgar. Josephine picked at a loose thread on her nightgown. After a while, Mother Elizabeth stopped laughing. Then she went to the river and didn't
This
come
story
back.
was posted on the
casual
channel
way
west
she
of
said it was
Betrayal.
somehow worse
Please
than
do not
tears would have
repost
been.
it in any form.
Josephine, when Elizabeth went to the river, was anyone with her? Father said she went alone, that she liked to walk by the water. The girl's voice dropped to barely a whisper. But Thomas said he saw Father's horse tied up near there that day. He told Mother Margaret, but she said he must have been confused. Clara's hands had gone cold. Did Thomas tell anyone else? Who would we tell? Josephine looked at her with eyes far too old for 8 years. Father owns everything, the doctor, the sheriff, all the men in town. They all work for him or owe him money. Mother Margaret said we had to be very careful about what we said. Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Talbot's voice cut through the hallway. Miss Whitmore, the carriage is waiting. Josephine slipped away like a ghost. Clara stood on shaking legs, returned the book to its shelf, and went to face whatever came next. The ride into Silver Ridge gave Clara her first real look at the town in daylight. It was bigger than she'd expected, but rougher, muddy streets churned up by wagon wheels, wooden sidewalks warped from weather, buildings that leaned slightly as if exhausted by their own existence. Men in work clothes moved between the mines and the saloons, and women in faded dresses hurried about their errands with heads down. No one smiled much. The seamstress shop was one of the nicer establishments, tucked between a general store and what appeared to be a lawyer's office. Mrs. Talbot ushered Clara inside with mechanical efficiency. Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Whitmore. Mr. Crow's instructions were quite specific. The seamstress was a tiny Chinese woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. She circled Clara like a bird of prey assessing its meal. Yes, yes, I have the measurements from the telegram. Turn, please. Clara turned obediently while Mrs. Chen pulled out swatches of fabric, all white or ivory, all expensive-looking, all utterly joyless. Mr. Crow prefers simple elegance, the seamstress said, more to herself than to Clara. No excessive ornamentation, nothing that draws undue attention. What about what I prefer? Clara asked. Mrs. Chen paused, measuring tape in hand. Then she glanced at Mrs. Talbot and continued working without answering. The fitting took an hour, standing still while being pinned and measured, choosing between fabrics that all looked identical, nodding along to decisions that had clearly already been made. Clara felt less like a bride and more like a doll being dressed for display. When it was finally over, Mrs. Talbot announced she had other errands to run and instructed Clara to wait in the shop. Don't wander off, Miss Whitmore. I'll return within the hour. The moment she left, Clara turned to Mrs. Chen. May I ask you something? The seamstress's hands stilled. That depends on the question. Did you make dresses for Victor Crow's other wives? Mrs. Chen's expression went carefully blank. I make dresses for many people in Silver Ridge. But you knew them. Margaret, Elizabeth, Mary. Miss Whitmore, I don't think... Please. Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just need to know if I'm walking into the same trap they did. For a long moment, Mrs. Chen simply stared at her. Then she set down her pins and went to lock the shop door. You should leave, she said quietly. Get back on a train and go anywhere else. Clara's heart hammered. So it's true. He killed them. I didn't say that. Mrs. Chen wrung her hands, clearly warring with herself. I don't know what happened to Mary or Elizabeth. I didn't know them well, but Margaret... She trailed off, pain crossing her features. What about Margaret? She came to me 2 weeks before she died, said she needed alterations on some dresses. She was showing getting bigger with the pregnancy. Mrs. Chen's voice dropped even lower. But she was so thin, Miss Whitmore, so pale, and her hands shook when she tried to hold the fabric samples. Was she sick? I asked her that. She said no, just tired. But when I was pinning her dress, I saw bruises on her arms, old ones, faded, and new ones coming in. The seamstress's eyes met Clara's. I asked if she was safe. She said yes, but the way she said it, like she was trying to convince herself. Clara's stomach turned. Did you tell anyone? Tell who? The doctor who signs whatever death certificate Mr. Crow asks for? The sheriff who owes his position to Crow's influence? Mrs. Chen shook her head bitterly. This town belongs to him. The mine employs half the men here. Their families depend on those wages. No one is going to risk their livelihood to question Victor Crow. But if there's evidence disappears in Silver Ridge. Records go missing. Witnesses forget what they saw. She unlocked the door again, checking the street nervously. Please, Miss Whitmore, I've said too much already. If Mr. Crow knew I was talking to you like this, I won't tell anyone. Clara caught her hand. Thank you for telling me the truth. Mrs. Chen squeezed back briefly. Your sister was kind to me. She didn't deserve what happened. Neither do you. She released Clara's hand and stepped back. But kindness doesn't protect you in this world. Power does. And Victor Crow has all the power here. The door chimed as Mrs. Talbot returned, arms full of parcels. Miss Whitmore, I hope you haven't been boring Mrs. Chen with idle chatter. Not at all, Clara said smoothly. We were just discussing hem lengths. Mrs. Talbot's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. The ride back to the mansion was silent. Clara stared out the window, her mind churning. Bruises. Trembling hands. Margaret had been afraid, maybe dying slowly, and no one had helped her. No one would help Clara either if she stayed. But where could she go with no money, no resources, no proof of anything except her own growing terror? That night, after another excruciating dinner where Victor discussed mining operations like she wasn't even present, Clara retreated to her room and waited until the house fell silent. Then she began searching. She started with the obvious places, the wardrobe, the dresser drawers, under the bed. Nothing but linens and the few items Mrs. Talbot had unpacked from her trunk. Margaret's belongings had been removed too thoroughly, but Margaret had lived here for over a year. She must have left something behind. Clara ran her hands along the walls, checking for loose panels or hidden compartments. She examined the floorboards, looking for one that might lift. She even checked inside the fireplace, dirtying her hands with old ash. Nothing. Frustration mounted. She sat on the bed, trying to think like her sister. Margaret had been clever, careful. If she'd wanted to hide something, where would she? The bed. Clara dropped to her knees and checked underneath, but found only dust. Then she examined the frame itself, running her fingers along the wood. There, a small notch in one of the posts, barely visible. She pressed it, and a section of decorative carving popped loose. Inside was a tiny hollow space, and folded inside that space was a leather journal, small enough to conceal in a palm. Clara pulled it out with shaking hands and opened to the first page. Margaret's handwriting stared back at her. If you're reading this, then I'm already dead, and you need to run. Clara's breath stopped. She flipped through the pages. Weeks of entries, maybe months. Margaret's careful script documenting everything. Dates, times, observations. And slowly, horribly, a pattern emerged. March 3rd V. Insists I take the tonic Dr. Garrett prescribed. Says it's good for the baby, but it makes me so tired and my stomach hurts after. March 10th. Asked V if I could skip the tonic today. He became very angry. Said I was being ungrateful after all he's done for me. I apologized and took it. March 15th, the tonic is making me worse, not better. I tried to tell Dr. Garrett, but he said V knows what's best, that I need to trust my husband. March 22nd, I'm frightened. My hands shake all the time now. I dropped a teacup today and V was furious, said I'm becoming careless like Elizabeth was. April 1st, I found Elizabeth's diary hidden in the library. She wrote about the same symptoms, the tonic, the tiredness, the shaking. She suspected V was poisoning her, but she had no proof and nowhere to go. The last entry was 3 days before she drowned. Clara's hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the journal. April 8th. I'm certain now. V is poisoning me. Small doses, something that mimics illness. Dr. Garrett is either complicit or willfully blind. I tried to refuse the tonic tonight, and V held me down while Mrs. Talbot forced it down my throat. I can't fight him. He's too strong, and everyone here obeys him without question. April 12th. I'm going to die. I know this now. The baby is the only thing keeping me alive. V wants an heir. But once the child is born, I'll be disposable like the others. I've hidden this journal where I pray someone will find it. If you're reading this, please, get out. Don't trust V. Don't trust Dr. Garrett. Don't trust anyone in this house. The final entry was dated 2 days before Margaret's death. April 19th. The labor has started. V sent for Dr. Garrett. I'm so
This
weak
story
I
was
can barely
posted
write
on the
this.
channel West
If I
of
don't
Betrayal.
survive, please know
Please
I tried.
do not repost
I tried to be
it in any
strong
form.
enough, smart enough, brave enough. I tried to protect the children. I tried to escape. But V controls everything, everyone. I'm so sorry, Clara. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you. Please forgive me. Please run. Clara closed the journal and pressed it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Margaret had known. She'd known she was being murdered, and she'd been powerless to stop it, just like Elizabeth before her, just like Mary, probably, though her story wasn't recorded here. And now Clara was next in line. A soft scratching came from the wall. Miss Clara, are you crying? Clara wiped her face quickly. I'm fine, Josephine. You don't sound fine. I just miss my sister. A pause. We miss Mother Margaret, too. She was nicer than Father. Clara pressed her palm against the wall, thinking of Margaret trapped in this room, growing weaker every day, knowing what was happening but unable to escape. Josephine, I need to ask you something important. Okay. Did your father ever give Margaret medicine, a tonic of some kind? The brown liquid in the little bottle? The girl's voice was uncertain. Dr. Garrett brought it. Father made her drink it every night. Clara's blood ran cold. Every night? Yes. Even when she said it made her feel sick. Father said she had to take it for the baby. A longer pause. Miss Clara, are you going to have a baby too? No, not if she could help it. No, sweetheart. That's good. Mother Margaret said the baby was what made everything worse. Clara stood, her decision crystallizing. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't marry Victor Crow and wait for him to slowly poison her like he had the others. She needed help, and the only person in this town who'd offered any was Rowan Hale. The next morning, Clara told Mrs. Talbot she wanted to go to church. The housekeeper's eyebrows rose fractionally. Mr. Crow doesn't typically attend services. I'd like to go anyway, for my sister's soul. Clara kept her voice meek, hopeful. Surely he wouldn't object to that. Mrs. Talbot hesitated, clearly uncertain. I'll inquire. Victor, it turned out, had no objection to his future wife attending church, as long as she was accompanied and returned promptly. Mrs. Talbot would escort her. The church was a small wooden structure at the edge of town, and the service was sparsely attended. Clara sat through the sermon without hearing a word, her mind racing through possibilities. After the service, as people milled about outside exchanging pleasantries, Clara spotted him. Rowan Hale stood near a hitching post, ostensibly checking his horse's saddle, but clearly watching the church entrance. When their eyes met, he gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the general store across the street. Clara turned to Mrs. Talbot. I'd like to light a candle for Margaret before we go. Make it quick. Clara slipped back inside the empty church and waited until Mrs. Talbot was distracted by a conversation with another woman. Then she slipped out the side door and hurried across the street. Rowan met her behind the general store, in the narrow alley between buildings. You look terrible, he said bluntly. I found Margaret's journal. Clara pulled it from her pocket, where she'd hidden it beneath her shawl. He killed her, poisoned her slowly, and the doctor helped cover it up. Rowan's expression darkened as he flipped through the pages. This is good. This is evidence. Will it be enough? I don't know. It's her word, her observations, but no concrete proof of what was in the tonic or who prescribed it. He closed the journal carefully. But it's a start. If we can get Dr. Garrett to talk or find the tonic bottle. I'm supposed to marry him in 5 days. Clara's voice cracked. I can't stay there that long. Every night at dinner, he watches me like he's planning exactly how to... She couldn't finish. Rowan gripped her shoulders. Listen to me. I'm working on getting a federal marshal involved. Someone outside Crow's influence. But that takes time, and I don't know if we have enough of it. Then what do I do? You survive. You stay alert. You don't eat or drink anything you haven't prepared yourself or seen come from a sealed container. You keep this journal hidden somewhere he'll never find it. His eyes bored into hers. And if things get bad, if you feel threatened, you run. You come find me. I'm staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street, room 7. You understand? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Miss Whitmore! Mrs. Talbot's voice carried across the street. Where are you? Go, Rowan said. Be careful. Clara tucked the journal back into her pocket and hurried out of the alley, her heart pounding. There you are. Mrs. Talbot's expression was severe. I told you to stay in the church. I'm sorry. I thought I saw someone I knew. The housekeeper's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more as they returned to the carriage. That night, Victor announced he would be away for 2 days on business. I trust you'll occupy yourself appropriately in my absence, he said over dinner. Mrs. Talbot will ensure the household runs smoothly. Clara nodded, relief flooding through her. 2 days without his oppressive presence. But after he left, the house felt even more like a tomb. Clara spent the time with the children when Mrs. Talbot allowed it, reading to them from Margaret's books, trying to coax smiles from their guarded faces. Thomas warmed to her more quickly than Josephine, who remained watchful and wary. Father says you're going to be our mother now, the boy said one afternoon as Clara read to him. Would you like that? He considered the question seriously. Will you stay? Or will you go away like the others? The trust in his voice broke her heart. I'm going to try very hard to stay. That's what Mother Margaret said. Josephine, listening from across the room, met Clara's eyes with a look that said she knew better than to believe in promises. On the second evening, Clara was in the library when she heard voices in the hallway, Mrs. Talbot and Dr. Garrett speaking in low tones. Mr. Crow wants everything prepared for after the wedding, the doctor was saying. The same tonic as before, but we'll need to adjust the dosage. This one looks healthier than the last. Clara's blood turned to ice. How long this time? Mrs. Talbot asked. That depends on how compliant she is. 6 months, perhaps. Long enough for propriety. Papers rustled. I'll leave the initial bottles with you. Start with the lower dose. We don't want her sick too quickly. It needs to seem natural. As you say, Doctor. Their footsteps faded down the hall. Clara sat frozen, Margaret's journal burning in her pocket. They were already planning her murder. She had to get out. Tonight, before Victor returned. Clara waited until the house was dark and silent. Then she changed into her plainest dress, packed a small bag with essentials and what little money she'd brought with her, and tucked Margaret's journal into her bodice. She was halfway down the stairs when a floorboard creaked behind her. Miss Clara? She spun to find Josephine on the landing, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Where are you going? Clara's mind raced. Josephine, I need you to go back to bed. You're running away. It wasn't a question. I told you to run? I know, sweetheart, but I can't. Take us with you. Clara's heart clenched. I can't. Your father would hunt us down, and I don't have the resources to protect you. Not yet. So you're leaving us here. Josephine's voice was flat, accusing, like everyone else. No, listen to me. Clara climbed back up and crouched in front of the girl. I'm going to get help, real help, from people your father can't control. And when I do, I'm coming back for you and Thomas, both of you. I promise. Promises don't mean anything. This one does. Clara gripped the girl's thin shoulders. I'm not abandoning you. I'm trying to save all of us. Do you understand? Josephine's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. What if Father catches you? Then you tell him I forced you to show me how to leave, that you tried to stop me. You protect yourself and your brother. Can you do that? The girl nodded slowly. Good. Now go back to bed and don't tell anyone you saw me until morning. Josephine hesitated, then threw her arms around Clara's neck in a fierce hug. Come back, she whispered. Please come back. I will. Clara waited until the girl disappeared into her room before continuing down the stairs. The front door was locked, and she didn't have a key. But the library had French doors that opened onto a terrace. Clara slipped through them into the cold night air. The grounds were dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. She hurried across the lawn toward the tree line, her bag banging against her hip. She'd almost reached the trees when she heard it, the distinctive click of a gun being cocked. Going somewhere, Miss Whitmore? Clara froze. Mrs. Talbot stepped out of the shadows, a pistol leveled at Clara's chest. I had a feeling you might try something foolish, the housekeeper said. Mr. Crow will be very disappointed. He had such high hopes for you. Clara's mind raced frantically. Please, you know what he is, what he does. I know Mr. Crow is a generous employer who expects loyalty.
This story was posted on the channel
Talbot's
west
expression
of
was
Betrayal.
iron. Now
Please
drop
do
the
not
bag and come
repost
back
it
inside.
in any form.
He's a murderer. You helped him kill Margaret, Elizabeth. Probably Mary, too. I helped them fulfill their obligations, Mrs. Talbot snapped. Ungrateful, disobedient women who didn't understand the privilege they'd been given. Your sister especially, always questioning, always suspicious. She made things difficult for herself. She was pregnant. She was terrified. She should have been grateful. The gun didn't waver. Now move, or I'll drag your body back inside and tell Mr. Crow you fell down the stairs. Wouldn't be the first time I've had to clean up a mess. Clara's options ran out. She couldn't outrun a bullet, and screaming would bring no help. The nearest neighbor was miles away. But then a voice cut through the darkness. Drop the weapon, ma'am. Rowan Hale emerged from the trees, his own gun drawn and aimed at Mrs. Talbot. The housekeeper's eyes widened. You're trespassing on private property, and you're threatening an unarmed woman. I'd say we're both breaking rules tonight. He moved closer, his aim steady. The difference is, my jurisdiction extends beyond Victor Crow's payroll. Now put the gun down before I arrest you for attempted murder. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Mrs. Talbot lowered her weapon with a sneer. Mr. Crow will destroy you for this. He's welcome to try. Rowan kicked the gun away and pulled out a set of handcuffs. Mrs. Talbot, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Clara, get behind me. Clara stumbled back as Rowan cuffed the housekeeper, who was already threatening lawsuits and retribution. How did you know I'd be here? Clara asked. I didn't. I've been watching the house since Crow left, hoping to find evidence. He secured Mrs. Talbot to a tree with the second set of cuffs. Looks like I got something better. Come on. We need to get you somewhere safe before he comes back. They ran. They made it to Rowan's horse before Clara's lungs gave out. She bent double, gasping, while he kept watch on the dark mansion behind them. Can you ride? He asked. I'll manage. He swung into the saddle and pulled her up behind him. Clara barely had time to wrap her arms around his waist before the horse took off at a gallop, racing down the hillside toward Silver Ridge's main street. The boarding house was dark when they arrived. Rowan helped Clara down and guided her inside through a back entrance, his hand firm on her elbow. The stairs creaked under their weight as they climbed to the second floor. Room 7 was small and spare. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single chair. Rowan locked the door behind them and immediately went to the window, peering through the curtains at the street below. We've got maybe an hour before Mrs. Talbot gets herself free or someone finds her, he said. Crow will know you're gone by morning, and when he does, he'll tear this town apart looking for you. Clara sank onto the bed, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. What do we do? We go to the sheriff, show him Margaret's journal, tell him what we know about the poisoning, force him to open an investigation. You said yourself the sheriff works for Crow. He does, but he's also got a reputation to maintain, and if we make this public enough, he won't have a choice. Rowan turned from the window. The question is whether we can get enough people to listen before Crow shuts us down. Clara pulled the journal from her bodice and held it out. This is all we have. Margaret's words against a powerful man who's bought everyone's silence. Rowan took the journal, flipping through it again with a deeper focus. His jaw tightened as he read. This is detailed. Dates, symptoms, her suspicions about Elizabeth. If we can get Dr. Garrett to confirm he prescribed the tonic, connect it to the deaths. He won't talk. I heard him with Mrs. Talbot tonight. They're planning the same thing for me. Clara's voice shook despite her best effort to steady it. 6 months, they said, long enough for propriety. Rowan's expression turned dangerous. Did they say what's in the tonic? No, but whatever it is, it's designed to look like natural illness. Something the doctor can explain away as complications or weak constitution or any of the things they always blame on women. He paced the small room, thinking. We need the tonic itself. Physical evidence. If we can get it tested, prove it contains poison. It's in the house, in Mrs. Talbot's possession, probably locked in her room or the medicine cabinet. Then we go back and get it. Clara stared at him. You want to break into Victor Crow's mansion? You have a better idea? I have several better ideas that don't involve getting killed. Rowan crouched in front of her, his eyes intense. Clara, listen to me. Without physical evidence, all we have is a dead woman's diary and the word of a runaway bride. Crow's lawyers will tear that apart in minutes, but if we can prove the tonic is poisonous, if we can show a pattern across 3 deaths— 4, Clara interrupted quietly. Mary makes 4. He nodded grimly. 4 deaths, all with the same method, all covered up by the same doctor. That's not coincidence, that's murder. But we need proof that will hold up outside this town, in a court that Crow doesn't control. Clara knew he was right. Hated it, but knew it. When? She asked. Tonight. Before Crow gets back, before they have time to hide or destroy anything. He stood, checking his gun. You'll stay here where it's safe. No. Clara stood too. I know the house. I know where Mrs. Talbot keeps things. You need me. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than marrying him? More dangerous than waiting for him to poison me like he did my sister? She met his gaze steadily. I'm coming with you. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. But you do exactly what I say, when I say it. Understood? Understood. They left the boarding house through the same back entrance, moving through Silver Ridge's empty streets like shadows. The town was silent except for distant sounds from the saloons, piano music and rough laughter that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. The Crow mansion loomed against the night sky, most of its windows dark. Rowan led Clara around to the servants' entrance he'd been watching for the past 2 days. The lock's old, he whispered. Give me a minute. He worked with tools from his pocket while Clara kept watch, her heart hammering so loud she was sure someone would hear it. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, the lock clicked. They slipped inside. The kitchen was dark and cold, everything put away with Mrs. Talbot's usual precision. Clara led Rowan through the house, treading carefully on floors she'd learned to navigate without sound. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every creak of old wood sounded like footsteps. They reached Mrs. Talbot's room on the first floor, near the back of the house. The door was locked. Can you pick this one? Clara whispered. Rowan was already working on it. This lock was newer, more stubborn. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he manipulated the mechanism. Then a sound from upstairs froze them both. Footsteps, light and quick. The children. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd told Josephine to go back to bed, but if the girl had heard something, if she'd come to investigate— The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. Miss Clara? Josephine's voice was barely audible. Is that you? Rowan's hand moved to his gun, but Clara grabbed his wrist. It's all right, she breathed. She won't tell. She moved to the base of the stairs where Josephine could see her in the dim light filtering through the windows. What are you doing here? The girl whispered. Getting evidence. Something to prove your father did bad things. Is the man with you? Clara glanced back at Rowan, still working on the lock. Yes. He's a lawman. He's helping me. Josephine descended a few steps, her nightgown ghostly in the darkness. Mrs. Talbot keeps medicines in her room, in a black cabinet by her bed, but she also has a key to Father's study. He keeps things there. Important things. Clara's pulse quickened. What kind of things? Papers. Locked in his desk. I saw him put Mother Margaret's death certificate in there after she died, and other papers with the other mothers' names. Records, documentation, exactly what they needed. Where does Mrs. Talbot keep the key to the study? On a ring in her top dresser drawer. 3 keys, one for the study, one for the medicine cabinet, one for the safe in Father's bedroom. Clara met Rowan's eyes. He nodded and redoubled his efforts on the lock. Josephine, you need to go back to bed, Clara said gently. If your father comes home and finds you awake— He's not coming home tonight. I heard him tell Mrs. Talbot before he left. His business would take 2 days at least. The girl descended another step. Miss Clara, are you really coming back for us? The question landed like a blow. Yes, Clara said, putting every ounce of certainty she possessed into the word. I promise you, I'm coming back. But right now, you need to go upstairs and pretend you don't know anything. Can you do that? Josephine nodded slowly. Be careful. Mrs. Talbot has a gun in her nightstand, too. Then she vanished back up the stairs like smoke. Rowan finally got the lock open. They entered Mrs. Talbot's room, and Clara felt like she was stepping into a cell. Everything military neat, not a single personal item visible except a small daguerreotype on the dresser. Rowan found the keyring
This story
exactly
was
where
posted on the
Josephine said
channel
it would
west
be,
of
while
Betrayal.
Clara located the
Please
black
do not
medicine cabinet.
repost it in any
Inside
form.
were rows of bottles, all carefully labeled in Dr. Garrett's spidery handwriting. And there, on the second shelf, was a brown bottle marked Fortifying Tonic, Mrs. V. Crow. Clara's hands shook as she lifted it. The liquid inside was murky, viscous. This was what had killed Margaret, what had made her weak and sick and terrified, while everyone told her it was for her own good. Got it? Rowan asked. Yes. Then let's get those papers and get out. Victor Crow's study was exactly what Clara had expected. All dark leather and expensive wood, with paintings of landscapes that looked like they'd been chosen for cost rather than beauty. The desk dominated the room, massive and imposing. Rowan tried the keys until one fit. The drawer slid open to reveal files meticulously organized and labeled. He pulled out 3 folders and spread them on the desk. Mary Crow, Elizabeth Crow, Margaret Crow. Each contained a death certificate signed by Dr. Garrett. Each listed a different cause: accidental fall, drowning, childbirth complications. But tucked behind the certificates were other documents: insurance policies, property transfers, financial records showing exactly how much Victor Crow had gained from each death. He's been doing this for years, Rowan muttered, photographing pages with the small camera he'd pulled from his coat. Marrying women, killing them, collecting the money. It's systematic. Clara felt sick. Why? He's already rich. Some men can never have enough. He kept photographing, working quickly, and some men just like the control, the power of deciding who lives and who. A sound from the front of the house stopped him mid-sentence. The front door opening, footsteps in the hall, heavy and deliberate. Victor Crow's voice, cold with fury. Where is she? Clara and Rowan stared at each other in horror. He wasn't supposed to be back. He told Mrs. Talbot 2 days minimum, unless Mrs. Talbot had gotten free and sent word. Search every room, Victor ordered. She can't have gone far. Multiple sets of footsteps now. He'd brought men with him. Rowan shoved the files back in the desk, pocketed the camera, and grabbed Clara's hand. They ran for the French doors that led to the garden, but voices were already coming from that direction. They were trapped. Rowan pulled Clara into a closet just as the study door opened. Through the narrow gap in the door, Clara could see Victor enter with 2 men she recognized from town, miners who worked his claims. Check the desk, Victor said. If she was here, she was looking for something. One of the men tried the drawer. Locked, boss. She doesn't have the key. Mrs. Talbot still has hers. But Victor's eyes swept the room like he could sense the intrusion. Search it anyway, and check the windows. Clara pressed herself against the back of the closet, barely breathing. Rowan's gun was drawn, ready, but she knew if they were found, shooting their way out would be impossible. One of the miners approached the closet. Clara's heart stopped. Then a voice from the hallway. Mr. Crow, we found something in the kitchen. Looks like someone broke in through the servants' entrance. The miner turned away. Victor swore viciously and strode out of the room, his men following. Rowan and Clara waited in the darkness, not moving, not breathing, until the footsteps faded toward the back of the house. Now, Rowan whispered. They burst from the closet and ran for the front door. Behind them, shouting erupted as someone realized they'd been in the study. There, stop them! Clara ran faster than she'd ever run in her life, her skirts tangling around her legs. Rowan pulled her through the front door and down the steps just as gunshots cracked behind them. They sprinted across the lawn toward the trees. More shots, closer now. Something whistled past Clara's ear and she stumbled, but Rowan caught her and kept them moving. They crashed into the forest, branches whipping at their faces. Behind them, men shouted and lights bobbed as the search spread. This way, Rowan gasped, pulling her toward what looked like a deer trail. They ran until Clara's lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. Finally, Rowan pulled her into a dense thicket and they collapsed, fighting for breath. Did they follow? Clara wheezed. Rowan listened, distant voices but not getting closer. I think we lost them. For now. Clara checked her bag. The tonic bottle was still there, miraculously unbroken. We got what we came for. We got more than that. Rowan pulled out the camera. These photographs will prove premeditation, financial motive, a pattern across multiple deaths. His expression was grim in the moonlight. But we just made ourselves fugitives. Crow won't stop until he finds us. Then we need to move fast. Get this evidence to someone who can act on it. The territorial marshal is 3 days' ride from here. I sent word days ago, but I don't know if it reached him or when he might arrive. Rowan stood, helping Clara up. In the meantime, we need to disappear. Crow owns this town. We can't trust anyone here. What about the sheriff? Especially not the sheriff. He checked his gun, reloading. There's an old mining camp about 10 miles north. Abandoned. We can hole up there until the marshal arrives. Clara thought of Josephine and Thomas, alone in that house with a father who was now hunting her. The children are safer with us gone than they would be if we got caught. Crow won't hurt his own kids. They're his heirs. Rowan's voice softened. I know it's hard, but the best thing we can do for them right now is stay alive and get this evidence where it matters. Clara knew he was right, hated it, but knew it. They started walking north, staying off the main roads, using the moonlight to navigate rough terrain. Every sound made Clara jump, snapping branches, night birds, the wind through the pines. Any of it could be pursuit. After an hour, they stopped at a creek to rest and drink. Clara's feet were blistered, her dress torn from branches and brambles. She'd never been so exhausted in her life. How did you know to watch the house tonight? She asked. Rowan sat beside her on a fallen log. I didn't know you'd run, but I've been watching Crow for weeks, documenting his movements, trying to find a weakness. When he left town, I thought it might be an opportunity. He glanced at her. Then I saw you running across the lawn with Mrs. Talbot pointing a gun at you, and the plan changed pretty quick. You saved my life. Again. You saved your own life when you decided to run. He leaned back, tilting his face to the sky. Most people in your situation would have just accepted their fate. Married him, hoped for the best, died quietly. Like Margaret. Your sister tried to fight. She documented everything, left you a warning. That took courage. Clara pulled the journal from her bodice, running her fingers over the worn leather. She was always braver than me. Smarter, too. I doubt that. It's true. She was the one who took care of things after our mother got sick. She was the one who managed the house when our father's business started failing. And when they needed someone to marry Victor Crow the first time, she's the one who agreed. She did it to save the family. And they repaid her by sending you to the same fate, Rowan said quietly. Clara's throat tightened. Do you think they knew? My parents. Do you think they knew what he was and sent me anyway? Rowan was silent for a moment. I think people are real good at not knowing things when knowing would be inconvenient. The truth of it settled over Clara like a weight. Her family had needed Victor Crow's money more than they'd needed her safety. Maybe they'd convinced themselves the rumors weren't true, that Margaret's death really had been childbirth, that Clara would be fine. Or maybe they just hadn't cared enough to ask questions. We should keep moving, Rowan said. Can you walk? Clara stood on aching legs. I'll manage. They walked through the night, following game trails and avoiding anything that looked like civilization. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Rowan led them to what looked like a pile of weathered wood and collapsed timbers. The mining camp, he said. What's left of it anyway? There wasn't much. A few structures still partially standing, most caved in or burned. But one small cabin near the edge of the camp still had a roof and walls, and when Rowan checked inside, it was empty except for some broken furniture and evidence of previous visitors. It'll do, he said. We can rest here during the day, move again after dark if we need to. Clara sank onto the floor, too tired to care that it was dirty. Rowan barricaded the door with an old table and took up position by the window. Get some sleep, he said. I'll keep watch. You need to sleep too. I will, later. He smiled slightly. I'm used to it. Comes with the job. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion pulled at her like a tide. She curled up in a corner using her bag as a pillow and let herself drift. She woke to the sound of horses. Rowan was already alert, gun in hand, peering through a gap in the boards covering the window. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls. It was late afternoon. How many? Clara whispered. 4, maybe 5. They're searching the old buildings. Clara's heart raced. Crow's men? Probably. Stay quiet. The horses drew closer. Clara could hear men's
This story
voices,
was
rough and
posted on the
impatient.
channel west of
Check that
Betrayal.
one.
Please do
It's
not
about to fall
repost
down,
it
Jake.
in any form.
Check it anyway. Boss said search everywhere. Footsteps approached their cabin. Clara held her breath as someone tried the door, pushing against Rowan's barricade. Locked from inside. Or just jammed. These old places are falling apart. A pause. Then the scrape of wood as someone tried to pry the door open. Rowan raised his gun, aiming at the door. Clara saw his finger on the trigger, saw the calculation in his eyes. If the door gave way, if the men came in, he'd have to shoot. And then they'd all know exactly where they were. The scraping stopped. Forget it. If anyone was here, they're long gone. Place looks like it's been empty for years. You sure? Boss said. Boss says a lot of things. I'm not risking getting buried alive in some rotten shack just because his mail-order bride got cold feet. Laughter. Then the footsteps retreated. Clara didn't move until the sound of horses faded completely. Even then, she and Rowan stayed frozen for a long moment. That was close, she breathed. Too close. They're spreading out, searching in a wider radius. Rowan lowered his gun. We can't stay here much longer. Where can we go? If the marshal doesn't come, he'll come. I made sure the message got out through channels Crow can't touch. Rowan checked the window again. But we might need to meet him halfway. There's a way station about 20 miles from here, on the road to Helena. It's run by a woman named Sarah Finch. She's no friend of Crow's. We can wait there. Why isn't she afraid of him? Because her husband was a miner who got crushed when one of Crow's shafts collapsed due to poor safety standards. Crow paid the widow's compensation, but made her sign papers saying it was an accident, not negligence. She took the money because she had kids to feed, but she's never forgiven him. Clara felt a flicker of hope. You think she'd help us? I think she'd help anyone trying to take Crow down. He moved away from the window. We'll wait until dark, then head northwest. It's rough country, but that works in our favor. Harder for them to track us. They spent the rest of the afternoon in tense silence, taking turns keeping watch while the other rested. Clara tried to sleep but kept jolting awake at every sound, imagining Victor Crow's cold eyes finding her. When darkness finally fell, they left the cabin and started north. The terrain was brutal, steep hills covered in loose rock, dense forests that blocked the moonlight, streams that had to be forded in icy water. Clara's feet were bleeding inside her boots, and her dress was in tatters, but she pushed forward. They had to keep moving. Sometime past midnight, they stopped to rest on a ridge overlooking a valley. In the distance, Clara could see scattered lights, another mining town maybe, or a ranch. How far to the way station? She asked. Another 10 miles. We should reach it by dawn if we keep this pace. Clara nodded, too tired to speak. Rowan offered her the canteen and she drank gratefully. The water was cold and clean, tasting of mountain streams. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. Sure. Why are you doing this? You could have just warned me on the train and walked away. Instead, you're risking your life, your career, everything. Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I had a sister once, Caroline. She married a man who seemed decent enough on the surface. Respectable job, nice house, all the things people look for. His voice went flat. Turned out he had a temper. Started with shouting, then pushing, then worse. By the time she tried to leave, she was too scared. Thought no one would believe her. Thought she had nowhere to go. Clara's chest tightened. What happened? She stayed, and one night he beat her so badly she didn't wake up. He stared at the distant lights. The sheriff called it a domestic dispute gone wrong. Tragic accident. No charges filed. Her husband remarried within a year. I'm sorry. I was a deputy back then, in a different territory. Couldn't do anything about it legally, wasn't my jurisdiction, and the local law wasn't interested in pursuing it. So I made it my business to learn everything I could about men like him, patterns of abuse, how they operate, how they get away with it. He turned to look at Clara. When I heard about Victor Crow and his dead wives, I knew what I was looking at, and I swore I wouldn't walk away this time. Clara understood now. This wasn't just about justice or duty. This was personal. Your sister would be proud of you, she said softly. Maybe. Or maybe she'd tell me I'm a fool for picking fights I can't win. He stood, offering Clara his hand. Come on, we've got ground to cover. They walked through the night, and Clara found herself telling him about Margaret. Not the horror of her death, but the memories before. How Margaret used to sneak Clara extra portions at dinner when their mother wasn't looking. How she'd taught Clara to read by candlelight. How she'd promised they'd always take care of each other. She kept that promise, Rowan said. The journal, the warning. She took care of you the only way she could. I just wish I could have saved her. You couldn't have. You didn't know. He navigated around a fallen tree. But you can still save those kids and every woman who might have been next in line after you. The thought steadied her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure no one else suffered what Margaret had. Dawn was breaking when they finally saw the way station, a sturdy log building with smoke rising from the chimney and a barn out back. Rowan approached cautiously, checking for any signs of Crow's men. The door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the doorway, rifle in hand, her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked them over with sharp eyes. "You'd be Rowan Hale," she said. "Got your message 3 days ago." "Mrs. Finch, this is Clara Whitmore." Sarah Finch's expression softened slightly. "The one set to marry Victor Crow. Heard you ran. Smart girl." She stepped aside. "Get in here before someone sees you. I've got breakfast on, and you both look like you could use it." Inside, the way station was warm and clean, with a fire crackling in the hearth. Sarah poured them coffee while Rowan explained everything: the journal, the tonic, the photographs, their narrow escape from the mansion. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each detail. "I knew that man was poison," she said when Rowan finished. "Everyone in the territory knows it, but knowing and proving are different things." She looked at Clara. "You've got courage, girl, more than most." "I'm just trying to stay alive." "That's how courage starts." Sarah refilled their cups. "The territorial marshal should be here within 2 days. I sent a rider as soon as I got Rowan's message. Until then, you're safe here. I've got good locks, better aim, and no love for Victor Crow or anyone who works for him." Clara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Crow's got a long reach and a mean streak. He'll come looking." Sarah's jaw set. "But let him try. I've been waiting years for a reason to put a bullet in that man." Over breakfast, eggs and bacon that Clara devoured like she'd never eaten before, they made plans. Rowan would develop the photographs using chemicals Sarah had for preserving food labels. Clara would write out a detailed statement about everything she'd witnessed and heard. When the marshal arrived, they'd present everything at once. "What about the children?" Clara asked. "Josephine and Thomas. They're still in that house with him." "Can't do anything about that until we have legal authority," Rowan said. "But once Crow's arrested, they'll be removed from his custody. The court will appoint a guardian." "Who?" "He's paid off everyone in town. The territorial court, not the local one. It'll be handled at a higher level." He met her eyes. "I know it's not ideal, but it's the best we can do right now." Clara nodded, though the thought of those 2 small children alone with Victor made her sick. After breakfast, Sarah showed Clara to a small room upstairs where she could rest and clean up. There was a basin of warm water, clean clothes that Sarah had pulled from storage, and a real bed with quilts. Clara washed away days of grime and fear, changed into clothes that actually fit, and collapsed onto the bed. She slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, it was evening again. Downstairs, she found Rowan and Sarah at the table, examining photographs laid out like evidence in a trial. "These are good," Sarah was saying. "Clear enough to read the documents. That combined with the girl's testimony and the tonic analysis." "You had the tonic analyzed?" Clara interrupted. Rowan looked up. "Sarah knows a chemist in Helena. We sent a sample this morning via her fastest rider. Should have results tomorrow." Clara sat down, studying the photographs. There was Margaret's death certificate, Elizabeth's, Mary's. There were insurance policies showing Victor as the beneficiary. There were property transfers that had occurred within weeks of each death. It was damning. If they could get it in front of someone who mattered. "The marshal will be here tomorrow afternoon," Sarah said. "I got word an hour ago. He's bringing a federal prosecutor with him." Clara's heart leaped. "They're taking it seriously?" "Rowan's been building this case for months. The journal and these documents just gave him what he needed to move forward. Sarah glanced at Rowan. Though I expect charging Victor Crow with multiple murders is going to cause an uproar. Man's
This
got
story
connections
was
all the way to
posted
the
on the
territorial
channel
governor.
west of Betrayal.
Then it's a good
Please
thing
do not
federal
repost it
jurisdiction
in any
supersedes
form.
territorial politics, Rowan said grimly. They spent the evening preparing. Clara wrote and rewrote her statement until every detail was precise. Rowan organized the evidence, creating a timeline that showed the pattern across all 4 deaths. Sarah cooked and kept watch, her rifle never far from reach. As night fell, Clara stood at the window staring out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, Victor Crow was hunting her. And somewhere in that mansion on the hill, 2 children were waiting for someone to save them. She'd made them a promise. And unlike the adults who'd failed them before, Clara intended to keep it. The marshal arrived just after noon, riding in with a prosecutor and 2 federal deputies who looked like they'd been carved from the same granite as the mountains. Sarah spotted them from the window and nodded to Rowan. That's them. Clara's hands went cold. This was it. Everything depended on whether these men believed her, whether the evidence was enough, whether federal authority could actually touch someone like Victor Crow. Marshal William Garrett, no relation to the doctor, thankfully, was a lean man in his 50s with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much. He dismounted and approached the way station with the careful gait of someone expecting trouble. Sarah opened the door before he could knock. "Marshal, good to see you." "Mrs. Finch." He removed his hat. "This is Prosecutor James Aldrich. We got your message about the Crow situation." Aldrich was younger, maybe 40, with the sharp look of a man who made his living with words. He studied Clara with unconcealed interest. "Miss Whitmore, I presume?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They gathered around Sarah's table, and Rowan laid out everything. The journal, the photographs, Clara's written statement, the bottle of tonic that now bore a chemist's report, confirming the presence of arsenic in doses calculated to cause slow, chronic poisoning. Marshal Garrett examined each piece of evidence with methodical precision, while Aldrich took notes and asked sharp questions. "How did you obtain these photographs, Mr. Hale?" "From Victor Crow's private study. Documents were secured in a locked drawer." "Without a warrant?" "Without a warrant," Rowan confirmed. "But given the immediate threat to Miss Whitmore's life and the likelihood of evidence destruction, I judged the exigent circumstances justified the search." Aldrich's expression was unreadable. "That's a legal gray area that Crow's attorneys will exploit." "Let them try. The documents are genuine. You can verify that with the county clerk who issued the death certificates. And the pattern is undeniable." Marshal Garrett set down the photographs. 3 dead wives in 5 years. All young, all healthy before marriage, all dead within 18 months of the wedding. Financial records showing Crow profited substantially from each death. He looked at Clara. "And you were next in line." "Yes, sir." "Miss Whitmore, I need you to walk me through everything. Start from when you received the telegram in Philadelphia." Clara did. She told him about the forced arrangement, the train journey, Rowan's warning, the cold reception at the mansion. She described the children's fear, Mrs. Talbot's complicity, the conversation she'd overheard about preparing the tonic. She told him about finding Margaret's journal and what it revealed about the systematic poisoning. Her voice shook when she described her sister's final entries, but she pushed through. When she finished, the room was silent except for the scratch of Aldrich's pen. "That's a compelling testimony," the prosecutor said. "But we need to address the weaknesses in this case. Crow will argue that the journal is fabricated, that the tonic was
This story was
legitimately
posted
prescribed
on the
by a
channel
licensed
west of
physician,
Betrayal.
that the
Please
deaths
do
were
not
coincidental
repost it
tragedy.
in any form.
He'll bring character witnesses, expert medical testimony, and enough legal firepower to bury us in motions." "So what are you saying?" Clara's voice rose despite herself. "That we can't touch him because he's rich?" "I'm saying we need to build an ironclad case." Aldrich's tone was firm but not unkind. "One that can survive the best defense money can buy. Right now we have strong circumstantial evidence. We need something more." "Like what?" Rowan demanded. "A witness. Someone who can testify to Crow's intent, his methods, his awareness of what the tonic was doing. The doctor would be ideal." "Dr. Garrett won't talk," Clara said. "He's been helping Crow for years." "Then we make him talk." Marshal Garrett stood. "Aldrich is right. We need testimony that directly implicates Crow in the poisoning. Without it, His lawyers will argue reasonable doubt until a jury gives him the benefit of it. How do we get the doctor to cooperate? Sarah asked. By offering him a choice, Aldrich said. Immunity in exchange for testimony, or prosecution as an accessory to multiple murders. Men like Garrett typically choose self-preservation. Marshal Garrett nodded. We'll bring him in for questioning, but first we need to secure the children. If Crow realizes we're moving against him, he might use them as leverage. Clara's heart jumped. You're going to get Josephine and Thomas? We're going to remove them from Crow's custody pending the investigation. They'll be placed with a temporary guardian approved by the territorial court. I want to go with you, Clara said immediately. Miss Whitmore, those children know me. They trust me. If strangers show up to take them away, they'll be terrified. She met the marshal's gaze steadily. I promised them I'd come back. Let me keep that promise. Marshal Garrett exchanged a look with Aldrich, who shrugged. All right, the marshal said, but you stay back when we approach the house. If Crow's there, things could get dangerous. They rode out within the hour. Marshal Garrett, his deputies, Aldrich, Rowan, and Clara. Sarah stayed behind to hold the way station, though she'd loaded her rifle and promised to shoot anyone who wasn't them if they came looking for trouble. The ride to Silver Ridge felt interminable. Clara's stomach churned with each mile, imagining what they might find. Had Victor returned? Did he know they were coming? Would he fight? As they crested the hill overlooking the mansion, Marshal Garrett raised his hand to halt. Smoke, one of the deputies said, pointing. Black smoke poured from one of the mansion's upper windows. Even from a distance, Clara could see flames licking at the curtains. No, she breathed. They spurred their horses forward, racing down the hill. By the time they reached the property, fire had engulfed the entire east wing. People were running from the house. Servants, workers from the nearby mining office, all shouting and carrying buckets. But no children. Clara was off her horse before it fully stopped, running toward the burning building. The children! Where are the children? A maid grabbed her arm. Still inside. Mr. Crow locked them in the nursery before he left this morning. We can't get to them. The hallway's full of smoke. Terror turned Clara's blood to ice. Where's the nursery? Second floor, east wing. But you can't. Clara was already running. Miss Whitmore, stop! Marshal Garrett shouted. But she ignored him. She hit the front door at full speed, bursting into a house transformed into hell. Smoke choked the air, thick and black. Heat slammed into her like a wall. Somewhere, beams cracked and crashed. Clara pulled her shawl over her mouth and ran for the stairs. The second floor was worse. Flames crawled across the wallpaper, eating through years of expensive decor like it was kindling. The heat was unbearable. The smoke so thick she could barely see. Josephine! Thomas! A faint cry answered her. Miss Clara! She followed the sound to a door at the end of the hall, locked, just like the maid said. Clara threw herself against it, but it wouldn't budge. Behind her, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Rowan appeared through the smoke, coughing. Get out of here, he yelled. The door's locked. Help me. He didn't argue. Together they slammed into the door, once, twice. On the third hit, the frame splintered and the door crashed inward. Inside, Josephine and Thomas huddled in a corner, clutching each other. Their faces were streaked with soot and tears. Come on! Clara grabbed them both. We're getting out! The ceiling groaned ominously. A section of plaster crashed down, missing them by feet. Rowan scooped up Thomas while Clara pulled Josephine. They ran back toward the stairs, but the hallway was collapsing, fire spreading faster than seemed possible. This way! Rowan veered toward a different staircase, a servant's passage Clara had never known existed. They barreled down narrow steps, Thomas sobbing against Rowan's shoulder, Josephine clinging to Clara's hand so tight it hurt. Behind them, something massive collapsed with a roar that shook the entire house. They burst out a side door into blessed, clean air. Marshal Garrett was there immediately, pulling them away from the building. Is anyone else inside? I don't think so, Clara gasped, her lungs burning. The servants got out. They watched from a safe distance as the Crow mansion burned. The east wing was completely engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. The west wing was fighting a losing battle. Within an hour, the entire structure would be gone. How did it start? Aldrich asked one of the servants. Don't know, sir. Mr. Crow left this morning, said he had business in Helena. Told Mrs. Talbot to lock the children in their room
This
and not let
story
them
was
out for any
posted
reason.
on the channel
Then a
west
few
of
hours
Betrayal.
later, we smelled
Please do not
smoke.
repost it in
Claire's
any
mind
form.
raced. Victor had left. He'd locked the children in their room. Then the house had conveniently caught fire. He did this, she said. He knew we were coming. Someone warned him, and he decided to destroy the evidence, and he didn't care if his own children burned with it. Marshall Garrett's expression turned to stone. Do you have proof of that? The timing, the locked door. He's eliminating anything that could be used against him. Or it was an accident, Aldrich said carefully. Old houses burn, sparks from a fireplace, a knocked-over lamp. In the middle of summer with no fires lit? Claire's voice rose. He tried to murder these children rather than let them be taken from him. Josephine pressed against Claire's side, trembling. Thomas was still crying, face buried in Rowan's coat. Marshall Garrett made a decision. We find Crow, now, and we bring him in for questioning about this fire and everything else. He turned to his deputies. One of you stays here, documents everything, talks to witnesses. The other comes with me. Where are we going? One deputy asked. Helena. If Crow's running, that's where he'll go. It's the territorial capital, and he's got friends there. The marshal's jaw set. But he's about to find out that federal warrants reach everywhere. They left one deputy to handle the fire scene and rode hard for Helena, leaving Clara and the children in Sarah's care. Clara wanted to protest, wanted to be there when they caught Victor, but she knew her place was with Josephine and Thomas. The children were in shock, silent and pale. Sarah cleaned them up, fed them soup they barely touched, and put them to bed in her spare room. Clara sat between the two small beds, holding their hands until they fell into exhausted sleep. When she finally went downstairs, she found Sarah at the window, rifle across her lap. You think Crow will come here? Clara asked. I think a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. Sarah's eyes never left the dark landscape. And Victor Crow just lost his house, his reputation, and his leverage. That makes him unpredictable. Clara sat across from her, too wired to sleep. What happens to the children now? Marshall said the court would appoint a guardian, someone vetted and appropriate. I want them. Sarah looked at her. You're 24, unmarried, with no home and no income. The court's not going to give you custody of 2 orphaned children. They're not orphaned yet. Their father's still alive. For now. But even if Crow goes to prison, or worse, you're not family, Clara. The court will look for relatives, someone established. There are no other relatives. Victor was an only child, and the children's mothers are all dead. There's no one else. Clara's voice cracked. I promised them I'd come back. I promised them they'd be safe. And you kept that promise. You saved their lives today. Sarah's expression softened. But keeping them safe long-term might mean letting someone else care for them. Someone who can provide stability. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She'd been running on fear and adrenaline for days. Now, sitting in Sarah's warm kitchen with the children sleeping safely upstairs, the weight of everything crashed down. She put her head in her hands and let herself cry. Sarah didn't try to comfort her with empty words. She just sat there, keeping watch, letting Clara break down without judgment. When the tears finally stopped, Clara felt hollowed out, but steadier. What do I do now? She asked. You wait. You testify when they need you to, and you figure out what kind of life you want to build for yourself.
This story was
Sarah
posted
stood
on
to
the
pour them
channel
both
west
coffee.
of Betrayal.
You're
Please
not
do
that
not
girl who got
repost
on the
it
train
in
in
any form.
Philadelphia anymore. You've seen what you're capable of. Don't waste that. Clara thought about Margaret's journal, about her sister's bravery in documenting her own murder, about the choice to run instead of submit, about breaking into Victor's study and finding the evidence that might finally bring him down. Sarah was right. She wasn't the same person anymore. The question was who she wanted to become. 2 days passed with no word from the marshal. Clara spent the time caring for the children, who clung to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. Josephine was withdrawn, barely speaking. Thomas had nightmares every night. Clara told them stories, read to them from Sarah's small collection of books, held them when they cried. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep. She just stayed. On the 3rd day, a writer came from Helena. Sarah read the message twice, then handed it to Clara. They got him. Clara's hand shook as she read. Victor Crow had been arrested attempting to board an eastbound train. Marshal Garrett had served federal warrants for suspicion of murder, fraud, and attempted murder of his own children. Dr. Garrett, when presented with the choice between immunity and prosecution, had broken within an hour and confessed to everything. The doctor's statement was devastating. He detailed years of providing Victor with arsenic-laced tonics, documenting how the doses were calibrated to mimic natural illness. He confirmed that Victor had poisoned all 3 wives deliberately, collecting insurance money and property with each death. He admitted to falsifying death certificates and medical records. And he revealed that Victor had ordered the fire, had paid a worker to set it while the children were locked inside, intending to collect on their life insurance policies and eliminate the only witnesses to his crimes. "There's more," Sarah said quietly. They found evidence of 2 other women before Mary. Women Victor courted but never married. Both died under suspicious circumstances. The prosecutor thinks he's been doing this for over a decade. Clara felt sick. 5 women, possibly more, all dead because one man had decided their lives were worth less than his wealth. What happens now? Trial? Federal court, probably in Helena, Aldrich says with Dr. Garrett's testimony, Margaret's journal, and the physical evidence conviction is almost certain. Sarah paused. "They're asking if you'll testify." "Of course I will." "It won't be easy. Crow's lawyers will try to discredit you, make you look hysterical or opportunistic. They'll drag your family into it, question your motives." "I don't care." Clara met her eyes. "Margaret deserves justice. They all do." The writer had brought something else. A letter from Rowan. Clara opened it with trembling fingers. "Clara," he'd written in surprisingly neat script, "Crow is in custody and won't make bail. The prosecutor is confident, and the marshal wants your testimony for the trial next month. I know this has been hell, but you did it. You stopped him. The children are safe because of you. Whatever happens next, remember that. You're braver than you think. Rowan." Clara folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her pocket. A month later, Clara stood in a federal courtroom in Helena and told her story. She described the telegram that had arrived on that Tuesday, her family's insistence that she marry a stranger, the train journey west with its robbery, and Rowan's warning. She detailed her arrival in Silver Ridge, the cold mansion, the frightened children, the whispered rumors about dead wives. She told them about finding Margaret's journal, reading her sister's terror written in increasingly shaky handwriting, about overhearing Dr. Garrett and Mrs. Talbot planning her own poisoning, about running for her life and breaking back into the mansion to steal evidence. The defense attorney tried to shake her, suggested she was a scorned woman fabricating stories for attention or money. But Clara held steady. "I don't want Victor Crow's money," she said clearly. "I want him to answer for what he did to my sister, to Elizabeth, to Mary, to the others. They deserve to live. He took that from them. And he would have taken it from me too if I hadn't run." The jury listened with stone faces. Dr. Garrett testified next, and his confession was damning. He detailed every prescription, every falsified report, every payment Victor had made to ensure his silence. The man was clearly terrified, sweating through his shirt as Aldrich walked him through years of complicity. Rowan presented the evidence, photographs of the documents, the tonic bottle with its chemist analysis, Margaret's journal carefully preserved and authenticated. The children didn't have to testify. The judge ruled them too young and traumatized. But their existence, their locked door, their near death in the fire, that spoke loudly enough. Victor Crow sat through it all with cold fury in his eyes. He stared at Clara like he could kill her with will alone. His expensive lawyers objected and maneuvered and tried every trick they knew. It didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Clara was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She watched Victor Crow's face as the foreman pronounced him guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Watched his mask of superiority finally crack. The judge sentenced him to hang. Clara felt nothing, no satisfaction, no relief, just a hollow ache for all the women who hadn't survived to see this day. After the sentencing, she walked out into Helena's main street and took her first deep breath in what felt like years. Rowan found her sitting on a bench outside the courthouse. "You did it," he said. "We did it." He sat beside her. What now? Clara had been thinking about that question for weeks, about what Sarah had said, about building a life, about becoming someone new. "The court's placing the children with a couple in Missoula," she said. "They're good people, a teacher and a carpenter. They'll give Josephine and Thomas stability, education, a real home." "That's not what I asked." Clara smiled slightly. "I know. I'm going to stay in the territory. Sarah offered me work at the way station, and I think I'll take it, at least for a while." "And then?" "Then I'll figure it out." She looked at him. "What about you? Back to tracking outlaws?" "Something like that." Rowan stretched his legs. "Though I might stick around Montana for a bit, make sure Crow actually hangs, tie up loose ends, maybe check in on a certain way station from time to time." "I'd like that." They sat in companionable silence, watching Helena go about its business. The world kept turning, indifferent to one man's crimes and one woman's survival. But Clara had survived. Against odds that should have crushed her, she'd survived and fought back and won. That had to count for something. A week later, Clara stood on the platform at the Helena station, waiting to board a train heading west toward Missoula. Josephine and Thomas were with their new guardians, the Hendersons, who seemed kind and patient, but the children had begged to say goodbye to Clara first. Thomas threw himself at her, crying. Clara held him tight. "You're going to be happy," she told him. "The Hendersons will take good care of you, and I'll visit as often as I can, I promise." Josephine hung back, guarded as always, but when Clara opened her arms, the girl stepped into them. "Thank you for coming back," Josephine whispered. "I told you I would." "I know, I just didn't believe it until you did." Clara's throat tightened. "You can believe it now. I keep my promises." She watched them board the train with the Hendersons, watched Thomas wave frantically from the window until the train disappeared around a bend. Then she walked to the telegraph office and sent a message to her parents in Philadelphia. It was brief. "Wedding canceled. Victor Crow convicted of murder. I'm staying in Montana. Don't write. Clara." She paid the clerk and walked out feeling lighter than she had in months. Her family had sold her to save themselves. They didn't get to know where she went or what she became. That was her business now, and hers alone. Sarah was waiting at the way station when Clara arrived, having made the journey from Helena by stage. "Welcome back," the older woman said. "Ready to learn how to run this place?" Clara shouldered her bag and smiled. "Ready." The work was hard, cooking for travelers, managing supplies, keeping the station in repair. But it was honest work, work she chose, and it kept her hands busy while her mind healed. Rowan stopped by every few weeks, sometimes on business, sometimes just passing through. They'd sit on Sarah's porch and talk about everything and nothing. He never pushed, never assumed, just offered his friendship and let her decide what she wanted. Slowly, Clara began to imagine a future that didn't involve running or hiding or simply surviving. She read Margaret's books in the evenings. She learned to shoot from Sarah, who insisted every woman should know how to protect herself. She corresponded with the Hendersons about the children's progress. And she started writing down her own story, not in a hidden journal, but in clear, unflinching prose. A record of what had happened, who Margaret had been, what Victor Crow had taken from all of them. One day she thought she might publish it. Let other women know the warning signs, the patterns, the ways men like Crow operated. But for now, she just wrote.
This story
lived,
was posted on the
and
channel
learned what it
west
meant
of
to be
Betrayal.
free.
Please do
6
not
months after
repost
the
it
trial,
in any
Clara
form.
received a letter from Philadelphia. Her mother had written, full of apologies and excuses and pleas for reconciliation. Her father had lost the business entirely, and they were in desperate straits. Could Clara possibly see her way to helping, given her connection to the Crow fortune? Clara read the letter twice, then fed it to the fireplace. She didn't owe them forgiveness. She didn't owe them anything. The Crow fortune, such as it was, had been seized to pay restitution to the families of Victor's victims. Clara had refused any claim to it. Blood money, she'd told the lawyers. She wanted no part of it. Instead, she'd taken Sarah's offered partnership in the way station. Modest income, hard work, but it was hers. Built on her own effort, not someone else's death. That felt like enough. Spring came to Montana Territory with a violence that surprised Clara even after living through a full winter. Snow melted in torrents, turning every creek into a river and every road into mud. The way station became a refuge for travelers stuck between destinations, and Clara found herself cooking for twice as many people as usual. She didn't mind. The work kept her hands busy and her thoughts from wandering to dark places. It had been 8 months since Victor Crow's execution. Clara had not attended, though Rowan had offered to take her. She told him she didn't need to watch the man die to know he was gone. The knowledge that he'd never hurt anyone else was enough. On a wet April morning, a stagecoach arrived carrying the Hendersons and the children. Clara saw them through the window and nearly dropped the pot she was scrubbing. She met them at the door, her apron still damp from dishwater. "We should have sent word," Mrs. Henderson said apologetically. "But we were already on the road when Thomas insisted he had to see you." Thomas launched himself at Clara with the enthusiasm of a 7-year-old who'd grown 2 inches since she'd last seen him. She caught him and held on tight. "I missed you," he said into her shoulder. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Josephine hung back, as was her nature, but Clara caught the ghost of a smile on the girl's face. "Come in, all of you. I'll make coffee, and the children can have milk." Clara ushered them inside, calling for Sarah. Over coffee and the biscuits Clara had baked that morning, the Hendersons explained their visit. Mr. Henderson had business in Helena, and they'd decided to make the detour to the way station. But there was something else. Something in the way Mrs. Henderson kept glancing at Clara with a mixture of hope and hesitation. "The children ask about you constantly," she said finally. "They've settled well with us. Don't misunderstand. But you're important to them in a way we can't replace." Clara's chest tightened. "I care about them too." "We know. We've seen the letters you write. How carefully you answer every question Thomas sends you." Mrs. Henderson set down her cup. "Miss Whitmore, we've been discussing this for some time, and we wanted to propose something." "All right." "The Hendersons are good people," Josephine said suddenly, her first word since arriving. "But they're not you." Clara looked at the girl, seeing something fierce in her eyes. Mrs. Henderson reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "We'd like you to be part of their lives, regularly, not just letters and occasional visits. The judge granted us guardianship, but the children need you too. We're not asking you to leave your life here, just to be in theirs more often." "How would that work?" "Missoula isn't far. A day's journey. You could visit monthly, or the children could come to you. Eventually, when they're older, if you wanted a more formal arrangement." She trailed off meaningfully. Sarah, who'd been listening from the kitchen, spoke up. "Way station's doing well enough that you could afford to make trips, and I can manage on my own for a few days at a time." Clara looked at Thomas, who was watching her with desperate hope, and at Josephine, whose mask of indifference didn't quite hide the same longing. "I'd like that," Clara said. "I'd like that very much." Thomas whooped and threw his arms around her again. Even Josephine smiled, a real smile this time. They stayed 3 days, and Clara soaked up every moment. She read to the children in the evenings, answered Thomas's endless questions about the way station, and had long, quiet conversations with Josephine about school and books and the nightmares that still sometimes woke her. On the last evening, Josephine asked Clara to walk with her. They went down to the creek, swollen with snowmelt, and sat on a fallen log. "Do you still think about Father?" Josephine asked. Clara considered lying, decided against it. "Sometimes, not often. I dream about him, about the fire mostly, but sometimes about before." The girl picked at the bark on the log. "Does that make me bad? That I dream about him even though he tried to kill us?" "No, sweetheart. It makes you human." Clara put her arm around Josephine's thin shoulders. "He was your father. You loved him once before you knew what he was. That's not something you can just turn off. Mother Margaret loved him too, I think, at first." Josephine was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she knew that he was going to kill her?" "I think she suspected, and I think she was very brave, trying to document it, trying to leave evidence behind. Like she was trying to protect the next person. Like she was trying to protect me," Clara said softly. "And in a way she did. If I hadn't found her journal, I wouldn't have known to run." Josephine leaned against Clara's side. "I'm glad you ran. I'm glad you didn't die like the others." "Me too." They sat in silence, listening to the rush of water over rocks. Spring birds called from the trees, building nests and claiming territory. The world was busy with the work of continuing, indifferent to human suffering but beautiful in its persistence. "The Hendersons are good people," Josephine said again. "But when I grow up, I want to be like you, not like Mother Elizabeth or Mother Margaret or any of them. Like you." Clara's throat went tight. "Why?" "Because you didn't let him win. You fought back." The girl looked up at her with eyes too old for 9 years. "You saved us, and then you survived. That's what I want to learn how to do." Clara held her closer. "Then I'll teach you. Everything I know about surviving and fighting back and building a life that's yours. Deal?" "Deal." When the Hendersons left the next morning, it was with plans for Clara to visit Missoula the following month. Thomas cried, but Mrs. Henderson distracted him with talk of the new foal their neighbor's horse had just birthed. Josephine didn't cry. She just hugged Clara hard and whispered, "See you soon." "See you soon," Clara promised. After they left, Sarah found Clara standing on the porch, watching the stage disappear into the distance. "You're good with those kids," Sarah said. "They're good kids. They've just had a rough start. So have you." Sarah lit her pipe, a habit that still startled Clara. "You ever think about having your own? Kids, I mean." Clara laughed. "I'd need a husband for that. And I'm not exactly eager to repeat the marriage experiment." "Doesn't have to be marriage. Could just be finding someone worth your time." Sarah gave her a pointed look. "Someone who maybe stops by here regular-like to check on you." "Rowan's a friend." "Uh-huh. And I'm the Queen of England." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's not like that." "Why not? Man clearly cares about you. You care about him. You're both single, roughly the same age, and you've been through hell together. That's a better foundation than most marriages start with." "I'm not ready for that. I might never be ready for that." Clara gripped the porch railing. "The last time I let someone else have a say in my future, I nearly died." "I'm not talking about letting someone control you. I'm talking about letting someone stand beside you." Sarah puffed on her pipe. "There's a difference, you know, partnership versus ownership." Clara knew Sarah was right, but knowing and feeling were different things. The fear that had driven her to run, to fight, to survive, it didn't just disappear because Victor Crow was dead. It lived in her bones now, a constant whisper that she couldn't trust anyone, couldn't let her guard down, couldn't risk giving someone power over her life. Even someone like Rowan, who'd never asked for power, who'd only ever offered help. "I'll think about it," Clara said, which was neither agreement nor refusal. Sarah seemed satisfied with that. "Good. Now come help me inventory supplies. We're low on flour again, and that useless supplier keeps shorting us." The rhythm of work was a comfort. Clara threw herself into it, managing the way station, learning Sarah's business practices, dealing with travelers who ranged from polite to insufferable. She learned to spot trouble before it arrived, to handle drunks without escalating, to keep accounts that balanced to the penny. Sarah taught her to ride properly, not the side saddle nonsense Philadelphia had insisted on, but real riding that let Clara control her horse. They went on supply runs together, and Sarah introduced Clara to the network of women who ran businesses throughout the territory, widows and spinsters and rebels who'd carved out lives on their own terms. Clara found herself part of a community she'd never known existed. Women who didn't need men to validate their existence, who built their own futures through grit and stubbornness, and refusing to accept the limitations the world tried to impose.
This story was posted on the channel
intoxicating.
west of Betrayal.
When Rowan
Please do
stopped
not
by in
repost
May,
it in any
Clara was
form.
on the roof replacing shingles that had blown off in a storm. He found her balanced on a ladder, hammer in hand, swearing at a particularly stubborn nail. "Need help?" he called up. Clara looked down and nearly lost her balance. He'd grown a beard since she'd last seen him, and the sun had darkened his skin even further. He looked solid and real, and like he belonged in this landscape. "I've got it," she said, driving the nail home with more force than necessary. "Stubborn as ever, I see." "You say that like it's a flaw." "Didn't say it was." He waited while she finished the repair and climbed down. "Sarah around?" "Supply run to Helena. Won't be back until tomorrow." Clara set down the hammer and wiped sweat from her forehead. "You're welcome to wait, or I can give her a message." "Actually, I came to see you." Something in his tone made Clara's stomach flip. Why? Because I've been thinking about what Sarah said the last time I was here, about how I need to stop dancing around what I want and just say it straight. He took off his hat, turning it in his hands. So here it is straight. I'd like to court you, Clara, proper-like, with the understanding that you call the shots, you set the pace, and if you say no at any point, I walk away and we stay friends. What do you say? Clara stared at him, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, the part that had grown fond of his visits, that looked forward to his letters, that trusted him in ways she didn't trust most people. But the other part, the scared part that remembered Victor Crow's cold eyes and controlling hands, screamed at her to refuse. I don't know if I can do this, she said honestly. I don't know if I'll ever be able to let someone that close again. I'm not asking for close, not yet. I'm asking for a chance to see if maybe, eventually, you might want that. Rowan's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him. I'm not Victor Crow, Clara. I'm not interested in controlling you or owning you. I just want to spend time with you and see where it goes. And if it doesn't go anywhere, then we're friends who gave it a try. No harm, no blame. He put his hat back on, but I think it might go somewhere, if you let it. Clara thought about Sarah's words, about partnership versus ownership, about Josephine saying she wanted to be like Clara, someone who fought back and survived and built her own life. Maybe part of building your own life was choosing who to let into it. All right, she said. We can try, but slow, really slow. Rowan's face split into a grin. Slow works for me. I'm a patient man. True to his word, he courted her with a patience that would have seemed impossible in another man. He visited when he said he would, and left when he said he would. He brought her books she'd mentioned wanting to read, fixed things around the way station without being asked, and never once tried to tell her how to run her life. When he held her hand for the first time, 3 months into their courtship, he asked permission first. When he kissed her, on a cool autumn evening with the stars spread out above them, he pulled back when she tensed and said, We can stop. We can always stop. Clara had kissed him again instead, harder this time, claiming it for herself rather than letting it be something done to her. It was different than she'd expected, gentler, safer, like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. Sarah watched their courtship with knowing eyes and said nothing, which Clara appreciated. The other women in their network were less subtle, offering advice and opinions that ranged from helpful to mortifying. But mostly, people left them alone to figure it out. In October, Clara traveled to Missoula for her monthly visit with the children. They were thriving. Thomas had lost a tooth and couldn't stop showing everyone the gap, while Josephine was top of her class and had made a friend, which Mrs. Henderson said was significant progress. On the last day of Clara's visit, as they sat on the Hendersons' porch watching Thomas play with the neighbor's dog, Josephine asked, Are you going to marry the lawman? Clara nearly choked on her tea. What? Mr. Hale. Are you going to marry him? The girl's tone was matter-of-fact. Mrs. Henderson says he's courting you properly and that he seems like a good man. He is a good man. But, Clara sighed, but marriage is complicated, Josephine. I'm not sure I want to get married at all after everything that happened. Mother Margaret said she wished she'd never gotten married. She told me that once, when Father was away. Josephine picked at her skirt. But you're different. You chose to run instead of staying. Maybe you could choose differently about marriage, too. Out of the mouths of children, Clara thought. Maybe I could. I think you should marry him if you want to. Not because someone tells you to, but because you want to. The girl looked at her seriously. That would be different, wouldn't it? Choosing it yourself? Clara pulled Josephine close. When did you get so wise? I've been practicing. Well, when Clara returned to the way station, she found Rowan waiting with news. He'd been offered a position as territorial marshal, overseeing law enforcement across Montana. It was a promotion, an honor, and it meant he'd be based in Helena. I'd still visit, he said quickly, as often as I could, but I'd be gone more, and the job's dangerous. I wanted you to know before I accepted. Clara sat with the information, turning it over. A year ago, she would have seen this as proof that men always left, always chose their ambitions over everything else. But she'd learned something over the past months. Ambition wasn't inherently selfish. People could want things for themselves and still care about others. The key was whether they asked you to shrink yourself to fit their dreams, or whether they made space for you to have your own. "You should take it," she said. "It's a good opportunity, and you'll be excellent at it." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She took his hand. "But I have a condition." "Name it." "I don't want to get married, not now, maybe not ever. I need you to be all right with that." Clara met his eyes. "I care about you, Rowan, more than I thought I could care about anyone after everything that happened. But the idea of marriage, of legally binding myself to someone, it terrifies me. And I need to know you're not courting me with the expectation that I'll eventually say yes to a proposal." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I'm courting you because I enjoy your company and I admire your strength, and I think you're about the most remarkable woman I've ever met. If you want to get married someday, I'd be honored. If you never want to get married, I'll still be honored to be in your life. However, you'll have me." He smiled slightly. "I already told you, Clara. You call the shots." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. Nothing to thank me for, I mean it." He took the marshal position and moved to Helena, and their relationship shifted into something long distance but no less real. He visited when he could, and Clara traveled to Helena occasionally for business. They wrote letters that grew increasingly personal, sharing thoughts and fears and hopes they'd never voiced aloud. Sarah teased Clara mercilessly about the frequency of the mail, but she also seemed pleased. "Good to see you building something on your own terms," she'd say. The year turned. Snow came and went. Spring returned with its usual violence, and Clara was there to see the creek flood, and the mud roads become impassable, and the whole territory emerge into summer like a flower forcing its way through frozen ground. On a warm June evening, Clara received a letter from the Hendersons. Josephine had asked if she could spend the summer at the way station, learning from Clara and Sarah. Mrs. Henderson wrote that they'd discussed it with the girl at length, and Josephine had been insistent. She wanted to learn how to run a business, how to be independent, how to survive on her own if she needed to. Clara wrote back immediately. Yes, absolutely yes. Josephine arrived in July, taller and more self-possessed than Clara remembered. At 10 years old, she already carried herself like someone who'd seen too much but refused to let it break her. "Thank you for having me," she said formally when Mrs. Henderson dropped her off. "Thank you for coming," Clara replied with equal formality. Then she hugged the girl tight. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too." They spent the summer working side by side. Clara taught Josephine how to manage supplies, how to deal with difficult travelers, how to keep accounts. Sarah taught her to shoot and ride and swear like a sailor when the situation called for it. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch and Clara would tell stories about Margaret, the real Margaret, not the frightened woman who'd died, but the sister who'd existed before, who'd been funny and smart and kind. "She would have loved you," Clara said one night. "She always wanted a daughter." Josephine was quiet for a moment. "I think about her sometimes, about what it must have been like knowing what was happening but not being able to stop it." She looked at Clara. "Do you think she was brave?" "I think she was terrified and she kept fighting anyway. That's the bravest thing there is." "Like you." "Like both of us," Clara corrected. "You were terrified in that locked room with the house burning down, but you didn't give up. You kept yourself and Thomas alive until help came." "I knew you'd come back. You promised." Clara's throat tightened.
This story was posted
And I
on the
always
channel
will.
west of
"That's a
Betrayal.
promise I'll keep as long
Please
as
do
I'm
not
breathing."
repost it in any
On
form.
Josephine's last night before returning to Missoula, she asked Clara a question that had clearly been weighing on her. "When I'm older, when I'm grown, could I come back here? Could I learn to really run the way station, maybe even take over someday?" Clara hadn't expected that. "You want to run a way station?" "I want to do what you do, help people, run a business, be independent." Josephine's expression was fierce. "I don't want to depend on anyone. I don't want to be helpless like Mother Margaret was, or scared like Mother Elizabeth. I want to be like you and Sarah, strong." Clara pulled the girl close. "You're already strong, sweetheart. You're one of the strongest people I know. And yes, when you're older, if you still want this, there will always be a place for you here. Promise?" Promise. The years unfolded with a rhythm Clara had never experienced before. Steady, predictable, hers. The way station prospered. Sarah's health began to decline, but slowly, giving them time to adjust. Clara gradually took over more of the day-to-day operations while Sarah handled the strategic planning and connections. Rowan visited regularly, and their relationship deepened into something Clara couldn't quite name. Not marriage, but partnership. Not obligation, but choice. He proposed twice over the years, always with the caveat that she could say no without consequence. She said no both times, and he'd smiled and said, "Figured as much." Had to ask anyway. She loved him for that. For asking without demanding, for accepting her answer without resentment. Josephine returned every summer, learning the business inside and out. By the time she was 16, she could run the way station as well as Clara could. By 18, she was making improvements that increased their profits. Thomas visited too, though less frequently. He'd found a love for carpentry and was apprenticing with Mr. Henderson. But he wrote often, and when he did visit, he still hugged Clara like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Sarah died in her sleep on a cold February night, 3 years after Josephine's first summer at the way station. She was 72 and had lived exactly as she'd wanted to, on her own terms, beholden to no one, leaving behind a legacy of fierce independence. She left the way station to Clara in her will, along with a letter that made Clara cry and laugh in equal measure. "You earned this," Sarah had written, "not by birth or marriage or luck, but by being stubborn enough to survive and smart enough to build something worth having. Don't let anyone take it from you. And for the love of all that's holy, marry that lawman or don't, but stop overthinking it. You know what you want, just let yourself have it." Clara read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into Margaret's journal, which she kept in a locked drawer. 2 women who'd shaped her life, their words preserved together. A month after Sarah's funeral, Rowan came to the way station with news. He'd been offered the position of U.S. Marshal, overseeing multiple territories. It would mean more travel, more danger, more time apart. "I'm taking it," he said, "but I wanted you to know first." Clara nodded. "Congratulations. You've earned it." "Come with me." She blinked. "What?" "Not as my wife, if you don't want that, but as my partner. We could travel together when possible, and when I'm working dangerous cases, you'd have the way station to come back to. Josephine's old enough to manage it now, and she's been asking for more responsibility." Rowan took her hands. "I'm not asking you to give up your life for mine. I'm asking if we can build something that includes both our lives." Clara stared at him, her mind whirling. For 5 years, she'd kept the way station as her anchor, her proof that she could survive and thrive on her own. The thought of leaving, even temporarily, even with the option to return, made her chest tight with old fears. But Sarah's words echoed in her head. "You know what you want. Just let yourself have it." What did she want? She wanted the way station, the independence it represented. But she also wanted Rowan, wanted the partnership they'd built, wanted to see where it could go if she let herself risk it. "I need to talk to Josephine," she said finally. Josephine, now 19, listened to Clara's proposal with her usual serious expression. "You should go," she said when Clara finished. "You really think you're ready to run this place on your own?" "I've been ready for a year. You're the one who hasn't been ready to let go." Josephine smiled slightly. "This is your place, Clara. It'll always be here when you need it. But you've spent 5 years proving you can survive alone. Maybe it's time to see what you can do with someone beside you." Clara hugged her. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best." So Clara said yes to Rowan's proposal, not to marriage, but to partnership. She traveled with him when his work allowed, learning to navigate a world bigger than Montana territory. She saw cities she'd only read about, met people from backgrounds she couldn't have imagined. When the work was too dangerous or she needed roots beneath her feet, she returned to the way station where Josephine ran things with impressive competence. It wasn't a traditional life. It wasn't what anyone in Philadelphia would have recognized as proper or acceptable, but it was hers, built on her own choices, her own terms, her own strength. Thomas got married at 21 to a girl from Missoula who made him laugh. Clara and Rowan attended the wedding, and Clara cried when Thomas introduced her as the woman who saved our lives. "I'm not a hero," she'd protested. "You are to us," Josephine had said quietly. On Clara's 30th birthday, Rowan asked her to marry him for the third time. They were camped under the stars somewhere in Wyoming territory, on their way back to Montana after a case that had taken 3 months to close. The fire crackled between them, and the night was so clear Clara felt like she could reach up and touch the sky. No pressure, Rowan said, as he always did. Just checking in. Clara looked at him across the fire. This man who'd saved her life on a train, who'd helped her escape a murderer, who'd stood beside her through trials and grief and building a new life. This man who'd asked for nothing except her company and offered everything without strings. Ask me again in 5 years, she said. He laughed. Fair enough. But something had shifted in Clara. The fear that had driven so many of her choices was still there. She suspected it always would be. But it was quieter now, less controlling. She'd proven to herself and to the world that she could survive, could thrive, could build a life worth living. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe it was time to stop overthinking and just let herself have what she wanted. Actually, Clara said, ask me tomorrow. Rowan's eyebrows rose. Tomorrow? I need a night to think about it, to make sure I'm choosing this for the right reasons. She met his eyes across the flames. But I think the answer might be yes this time. His smile was slow and warm. I'll ask you tomorrow then. And whatever you answer, I'll respect it. Clara knew he would. That was why she thought she might finally be ready to say yes. They married in a quiet ceremony in Helena with Josephine and Thomas as witnesses and the territorial judge officiating. Clara wore a simple blue dress, not white. She'd never liked white anyway. Rowan wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. When the judge pronounced them married, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not fear, not obligation, not duty, just choice. She'd chosen this. Every step of the way she'd chosen. That made all the difference. They honeymooned at the way station, which made Josephine roll her eyes but also smile. Clara showed Rowan all the improvements she and Josephine had made over the years, introduced him to the network of women who ran businesses throughout the territory and taught him how to cook the biscuits Sarah had perfected. On their last night there, they sat on the porch where Clara had spent so many evenings with Sarah. Any regrets? Rowan asked. Clara thought about the girl who'd boarded a train in Philadelphia, terrified and sold like property. She thought about Margaret, whose bravery had saved Clara's life. She thought about Victor Crow and the women he'd killed, the children he'd traumatized, the evil he'd embodied. And she thought about everything that had come after, the running, the fighting, the surviving, the building, the choosing. No regrets, she said. Not anymore. She leaned against Rowan's shoulder and looked out at the Montana landscape that had become home. Tomorrow they'd ride out to whatever came next. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged. The past was buried. The future was unwritten. And Clara Whitmore, no longer a victim, no longer running, no longer afraid, was finally completely free. Josephine took over the way station permanently when she turned 25, running it with a mixture of Sarah's business sense and Clara's compassion. She never married, though she had several offers. I'm too busy building something that matters, she'd say, and Clara understood exactly what she meant. Thomas and his wife had 4 children who called Clara Aunt Clara and climbed all over Rowan whenever he visited. The eldest daughter showed signs of Josephine's fierce independence, and Clara delighted in encouraging it. The manuscript Clara had been writing for years, the true account of Victor Crow's crimes and the women he'd killed, was published under a pseudonym. It became required reading in certain circles, a cautionary tale and a rallying cry. Women wrote to
This
Clara
story
from
was
across the
posted
country,
on the channel
sharing
west
their own
of
stories
Betrayal.
of escape and survival.
Please do not repost it
Clara
in any
answered
form.
every letter. She and Rowan built a life that defied convention, sometimes together, sometimes apart, always choosing each other even when distance separated them. He never tried to control her movements or decisions. She never resented his work or ambitions. They'd found something rare, a partnership built on mutual respect and the understanding that love didn't require ownership. On Clara's 40th birthday, she returned to the way station for a celebration. Josephine had organized the whole thing, inviting everyone who mattered, Rowan, Thomas, and his family, women from the network Sarah had built, even the Hendersons, who were elderly now, but still sharp. As Clara stood on the porch watching people laugh and talk and share stories, Josephine came to stand beside her. Happy? the younger woman asked. Clara thought about it. Happiness wasn't something she'd expected to find. Survival? Yes. Independence, eventually. But actual bone-deep happiness? Yes, she said, surprised to find it was true. I'm happy. Good. Josephine squeezed her hand. You deserve it. After everything. So do you. So do all of us. They stood together in comfortable silence, two women who'd survived what should have broken them and built lives that meant something. Inside, someone called for Clara to make a speech. She laughed and went to join them, Rowan's hand finding hers as she entered the crowded room. She thought of Margaret, wished her sister could see this, the life Clara had built from the ashes of the one that was supposed to kill her, the family she'd chosen instead of the one that had sold her, the freedom she'd claimed and defended and shared with others who needed to know it was possible. 3 wives had died in Victor Crow's mansion. Clara had nearly been the 4th. But she'd run. She'd fought. She'd survived. And in surviving, she'd built something beautiful. That was justice. That was victory. That was enough.